Good evening. Welcome, commissioners, participants, and interested parties to the March 10th, 2022 meeting of the Cohasset Conservation Committee. I'm Chris McFarland, Chairman of the Conservation Committee, and will be running tonight's meeting as we implement Massachusetts and Cohasset Wetland Protection Acts and Cohasset Stormwater Management Regulations. We'll be operating this meeting using the Zoom platform and ask the public who wish to speak to enter your questions or comments in the chat box. Please include your name and address. Only those who include their name and address will be recognized. Present this evening, no Angela tonight, huh?
Yeah, I don't know where she is.
Oh, well. All right, present this evening is the Town Conservation Agent, Charlotte Patel. And now I'll take a roll call vote of commissioners and associate commissioners. Please respond by repeating your name and saying present. William Ashton.
William Ashton, present.
Tom Bell.
Tom Bell, present.
Kathy Berrigan.
Berrigan, present.
Eric Eisenhower.
Eric Eisenhower, present.
Trish Grady is not present. Jay Pampari.
Jay Pampari, present.
Chris McFarland is present. And Associate Commissioner Chris McIntyre.
Chris McIntyre, present.
Great. So tonight we have a quorum of 6 voting members. We'll ask, all votes will be taken via roll call with each commissioner answering yay, nay, or abstain. Our first hearing this evening is an RDA 22-06 for 685 Jerusalem Road. I'll have to read in a notice of public hearing. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetlands Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 10th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on a Zoom platform from applicant Fabrizio and Marianne Lombardi for a request for determination of applicability 22-06 to remove a large damaged maple tree from the property at 685 Jerusalem Road. Public is invited to offer input on this application. Oh, that would have happened already because it's via email. Anyway, we'll go from there.
So we have Fabrizio Lombardi, who's the property owner, and Angela messaged us in the chat that she's here, so I'll promote her.
Hi. So with this request, we are in the process to ask for an immediate removal of an unsafe maple tree, which is labeled item A on the map that I provide you. This maple tree is a swamp maple tree, so it's about 40 feet high, and it has been partially damaged by the storm that we had in October. As a result, it swings very dangerously on the property. And it has been considered as unsafe when there are winds in excess of 20 miles per hour. The top tends to swing a lot. At the same time, I am alerting you that if approved, we would be also removing 2 large maple trees and grind it to the root, while the item A is within the 100 feet limit from the pond at 92 feet, to be honest. The other 2 maple tree labeled B and C are outside of the 100 feet.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lombardi, are you sharing your screen, or had you hoped to share an image with us?
Do you want me to share what?
Well, you're talking about something that's on the plan, so can you share the plan, or can we have?
I don't have it here with me. I have the paper copy.
I can share it. Here we
Okay,
go.
You can share it, Charlotte?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, here they are. Sorry. I didn't have, I have them the paper copy. So item A is the maple tree to be removed, which is deemed dangerously on top of the house. B and C are two trees that are outside of the 100 feet zone, but they've been cut down substantially. Actually, are just stumps below the power line by because they were deemed dangerous as far as the power line, and both of them were in fact rock to the core. So they were removed about, I would say, 5 weeks ago. They are large stumps, and as part of this request, they will be cut down. They are a sore eyesight at the moment, but we want to cut them down and grind them to the root. So that are the two requests that we would like to put forward.
Charlotte, do you have any photographs to share with us?
I do, yes, I can pull those up. And I'll just add that, I did talk to Fabrizio about, submitting this RDA just because when I was called to the site from some fallen tree reports, we talked to National Grid, and they said that normally they would just cut the branches, but since these trees were dead, they cut it down to below the power line, and then they property owner's responsibility to remove the rest of them. So this was when we were at the scene. You can see that the trees have been cut below the power line currently, and this is B and C that were shown on the plan. And then over here, you can see A, which is closest to the house, and that's the one that's 92 feet away. And so, as you can see, it has a close proximity to the roof.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I've looked at this application. The two of the three trees and mentioned here are, one of them is 115 feet. The other one is 122 feet. It is out of our jurisdiction. The one tree I do see here is 92 feet. That's obviously dead, and I think we should approve this application.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Am I allowed to second Jay's motion?
Well, so Jay Pamparo will make a motion to issue a negative two
Move along.
determination on the RDA at
Jay,
685
can I-
Bruce Road.
Jay, can I ask you just to hold on 1 second? So Alex Berg from 45 Windy Hill, you just, I don't know, this is.
That's 45 Windy Hill is an application that's in front of us later this evening.
No, I understand, but I'm just making sure that Nikki, who put that into the chat box, wasn't looking at anything on this application. So that's fine. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Jay Pamparo make a motion to issue a -2 determination for the project at 685 Jerusalem Road.
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second to issue a -2 determination for the project at 685 Jerusalem Road, we'll take a roll call vote. William Ashton,
William Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Jay Pari,
Jay Pamparo, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 600.
Mr. Chairman, there is a question about
Yep.
that tree in the chat.
It's a little late there.
Sorry.
Just says Amy Bernecki, 662 Jerusalem Road. There's not actually a question. Oh, I'm sorry, here it is. I'm wondering if any trees can be planted to replace some of these trees, especially since they are next to a scenic road. So as Mr. Pampari mentioned, the two trees that are out on the road are not within our jurisdiction, so we can't require that. The other tree is actually in the outer buffer zone. So again, we can't require mitigation planting in that area, but we could mention to Mr. Lombardi that, or just make note that his neighbors are certainly interested in keeping the scenic quality of that road. And if there's ever an opportunity for you to plant other trees, your neighbors would certainly appreciate it.
Yes, we were. So let me tell you about the 2 trees that are outside of the jurisdiction zone. We were going to put some more bushes because we already have some bushes there. For the one that it is the item A, which is a 92 feet from the pond, we have an extensive, I think you can see it from the first picture that we have provided. We have an extensive juniper underbrush. So we cannot really put any trees on there. It's on a slope. So that's the only things that I can say, but certainly we will be planting trees. If you pass along Jerusalem Road on the summer, you will see my extensive collection of bonsai tree.
Yes, I was going to say that I think that Mr. Lombardi, I don't live too far from me, but far enough to know I'm not on the butter to the property. But you'll notice the extensive bonsai trees,
Yeah.
pardon me. And I feel that Mr. Lombardi's not here to take any trees down that haven't already been taken down by National Grid, etc. So
Yeah. In fact, these things was rather unplanned because they came 1 week before and they said, you know, you're gonna cut them this down because they were expecting 2 days after that a big storm, so they wanted to make sure.
And,
All
and
right.
there is a question in the chat about the scenic road designation of Jerusalem Road. I will say that unfortunately that does not fall within the Concom's jurisdiction. I believe that's falls in planning. So unfortunately that's a different board, but the scenic road designation area, Charlotte, if you could look into that and see if this property is impacted by that, that would be great. And also try and talk to the resident at 662 to Amy to educate us all on that at a later time. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually did speak to Amy on the scene at the time when the trees are being cut down. I did talk to the planning director in town hall, and it does look like the trees are in Mr. Fabrizio's property and not in the Jerusalem Road right of way. So it doesn't seem like that a special permit would be needed to cut them down, but I'm happy to double check on that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Lombardi. We approved this project for you to remove those trees, and Charlotte will be in touch with you if there's any other concerns.
Not really. So just one final question. Can I start? Do I have to wait for Charlotte to send me the formal approve, or I can notify the tree service?
So Fabrizio, I will issue the -2 determination form. I'm happy to do that tomorrow, so I can, we can touch base tomorrow.
No
It's a pretty quick form.
All right. Thank you very much then.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Our next project this evening is RDA 22-07 for an Eagle Scout project. I'll read the notice of public hearing for Great Brewster Woods in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetlands Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw. Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 10th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Via remote participation on Zoom platform from applicant for a request of determination 22-07 from Brendan Singari to refurbish a walkway in Great Brewster Woods as part of an Eagle Scout project, as well as the creation of a new trail in Great Brewster Woods. So hello, Brendan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So, yes, I'm looking to have my Eagle Scout project done in Great Brewster Woods, owned by the Cohasset Conservation Trust. And I've been working closely with representatives like Katie Holden here in the meeting and Sarah Sharon to organize this project. Actually, could I just quickly share my screen?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Sorry, 1 second.
I'm sorry, Katie, are you with the Cohasset Conservation?
Yes,
Trust?
I'm a director with the Cohasset Conservation Trust, so
Thank you.
yes.
I'm sorry. Here we go. I think I got it.
We see your screen. We don't see.
Yeah.
Does it say Great Brewster Woods?
No, it says Zoom.
No,
phone.
Charlotte, can you share your screen here? Is that possible?
Sure, I can do that. Oh,
It's a
Yeah.
slideshow.
okay.
No.
I'm not quite sure why this is.
You might want
Um,
to unshare your screen there so we don't see what's on your
Yes.
computer.
Brendan, I can pull up the RDA form while you look for that, if you want to, you want me to do that? Oh, got it. There you go.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so yes, for the first part of my Eagle Scout project is creating a new trail in Great Brewster Woods. So this is my digital mapping of Great Brewster Woods, and it includes the existing trails as well as the new trail that I would like to clear. And you can see that, oh, actually, so this is the portion. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes, so
Yes.
this right here is my new trail that I hope to build. And it lies between the 50-foot buffer and the 100-foot buffer to Dean's Meadow. And the closest point is right here. And I've measured that to be approximately 63 feet. And I've walked this trail with Ms. Bechtel, and she's claimed that it could be within Conservation Commission's jurisdiction in the outer buffer zone. But the majority of the trail is upland and more than 100 feet away from Dean's Meadow outside of jurisdiction. And after entering the 50-foot buffer, the trail quickly exits the area, returning to the upland area, which you can see over here. And this is upland area, and it goes downward along a rocky ledge. And this right here is the 63 feet closest point to the wetlands. So the work that I would be doing to clear this trail includes that of a chainsaw cutting away fallen trees, really only one fallen tree that falls across the trail that I hope to clear. The removal of deadfall and debris from previous storms, and the use of hand clippers to remove any small branches and vines that overhang the trail, and many of which are invasive. But no saplings or living trees would be cut down or removed, and only one fallen tree will be removed from this trail, which is the one I mentioned, and it is right about here. And as Katie told me, who's with the CCT, she said CCT's policy is to cut and leave by the side of the trail, not remove the fallen tree. So instead, I'll use it as a more boundary for the trail once I cut away that one fallen tree. And for the second part of my project, there is a boardwalk that is falling apart, and that's in the highlighted portion. So it is broken. It has rotting planks. I'll show you a few pictures later on, but it is deemed to be a safety hazard. And much of the boardwalk exists within the resource area and buffers, but the work I'll be doing would only increase would only include the replacement of some existing structures and repairing damaged ones. The materials I'd be using are approximately 3 wooden planks. That's just one of the broken boards, and It is in a wetland, but it is previously existing structure. So I would simply be replacing those two boards along with this one on the right. So to prevent tripping or any accidents from happening. And that's about it.
Brendan, will the wood you're putting in place going to be treated?
It will be pressure treated, yes. It'll
With what?
be out of the water.
Yeah, it'll be treated with what, Brendan?
It'll be pressure treated, and it is ACQ, just waterproof treatment, alkaline copper quaternary. It is safer because it doesn't have, sorry, it, sorry about that.
Right. No, I think the question, Brennan, I think we're trying to put in a suitable material here. If approved, pressure treated would not be the first, may not be the first choice because it contains arsenic. But if there was some marine wood or some other material that would still be stabilize the area and be safe, I think that's what we would be looking for. I don't know if
Yes.
you've done any research on that.
I have. So the pressure treated wood I would be using is, I was looking for it. I have some notes here, but it is treated with ACQ, alkaline copper quaternary, which is an environmentally friendly water-based preservative that is free of arsenic and chromium.
That sounds
Okay,
good.
there you go.
There you go.
Should have said that. Should have said that the first time.
I was
Be
looking
home by
for it,
now.
my notes.
You'll be finished. Okay.
Darla, do you have anything to add to this application?
Yeah, so I went out with Brendan and Katie in the winter to look at the conditions, and we just went out again in the spring. And we did obviously look at the lowest points in the trail. And I do have pictures of that fallen tree if anyone would like to see it, but it's good that, after talking to the trust, that they're just going to leave it as a, trail boundary. And for the most part, I'm happy to show pictures of the upland part of the trail because you can definitely see it goes around a large ledge outcrop. And the lowest point in the trail does seem to be hugging where that ledge outcrop ends. So it's kind of just looping around and then going back up and connecting to the existing trails.
Charlotte, is this part of a stream network, moving water?
So this is part of Dean's Meadow, and I think there is a stream right here. I'm happy to show pictures of the other sides. I'm not sure if it's like an interconnecting system, but it's definitely in across Dean's Meadow where there are streams present.
Yeah, I suppose my question is, it brings up the question of the vernal pool conundrum that we run into and whether we have a vernal pool. It looks very stagnant and very lush and very organic. Tom, what do you think? Do you have any feelings on that?
Can I speak for?
Yeah, Katie, go ahead.
So I was a former agent, and I know vernal pools very well. This area, the stream part that flows only part of it's intermittent, that flows part of the year is on the other side of Dean's Mill. This is the wettest. What you're seeing is the wettest it gets. It's usually pretty dry. So in this particular spot, it's doubtful from my experience being on these trails that there's the vernal pool in this area.
Katie, from your viewpoint, what would disqualify this as a vernal pool this time of year? Because I know it's early and things haven't had a chance to hatch and grow.
Well, actually, the salamanders and frogs have moved the past few days, and I expect much more movement this week. And so there's probably already a lot in the pools right now. And so I would expect, if there's, for example, if the species we're talking about is salamanders, then I expect eggs in the next few weeks. So it's a good time to kind of explore. The pond at Holly Hill is a great one because there's always eggs in there that you can just see from the shore. You don't have to, touch anything. So the next month is a good chance to kind of explore some more.
You feel this would be egg free?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, the water does not. It does not last long enough it's pretty shallow, but it would worth exploring in the next month in maybe other areas. But I haven't seen anything
Okay.
But we should be hearing stuff soon, so that'll be exciting.
So if,
Well, since
after
we're
the
so close-
boardwalk's fixed, we can then examine it.
Exactly.
Well, again, so we're really close to being able to determine one way or another. I mean, as you say, the amphibians are starting to move around. We've had these warm days. As soon as we see that 40-degree water, we should be able to determine this one way or another, it seems.
Oh, yes, yeah, you can look for evidence and figure, see if you can see anything. Yeah, the next couple months are a good time to kind of see. Yep.
So,
Any sites in town, you know?
yeah, right. We've got a number of them that we're going to look at. And this should probably be one of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a vast wetland there. So I think maybe in the way back, pretty far in, you're gonna need some waders. Or just get, go in your sneakers and get wet. But that's usually what it takes. They're not, they're usually not at like Holly Hill where just sitting there looking. It usually takes some effort.
Yeah.
But Brendan, the kind of work you'll be doing here would not damage it if it were a vernal pool, would it?
Sorry?
The type of work you'll be doing here, if it were a vernal pool, you would not be damaging it, would you? It looks like you're just going out and laying some planks down.
No, I would not be interfering with that at all.
Okay.
You'll be taking all the damaged wood out, correct?
Yes, I'd be properly disposing of that at the DPW station and
Okay.
simply replacing them.
Well, as I said, this is something that we've really have not paid very much attention to in the last few years, it seems. And I'm uncomfortable jumping into any of these until we've had a chance to actually examine them.
When are you planning on starting, Brendan? Do you have a timeline?
I was hoping to start early April.
March.
So I know, Brendan, if you can explain that as an Eagle Scout project when you're aging out in May.
Yeah.
And so time is definitely of the essence. And the boards are a safety hazard right now. So CTT is very interested in having this fixed as soon as possible. The trail, there's only a tiny section in the outer buffer and there's no grading. You don't even have to do anything. It's cutting one tree and putting it at the side because dead wood is preferable for wildlife habitat than live wood. So that's where CCT's policy comes from. And then, and that's it. The portion in the buffer zone is flat and there's one tree that's going to be cut, and then put aside. So it's I'm happy to report that it's a very straightforward, simple project as far as from the, outer buffer zone concerns.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the part that's within the 100-foot, but outside of the 50-foot buffer. But probably this is a trail that the trail through the wetland and through all the buffers is something. Did you actually how long has that trail been there?
This was done by a previous Eagle Scout quite a while ago. We also have CCT has other boardwalks in other areas and Audubon and trustees. And it's pretty common in certain, places you want to promote, I know it's a balance, but you want to promote education and you want people to experience wetlands and so that they want to protect them and be former and then become conservation commissioners when they get older. So it's definitely permittable from many have been permitted in the past.
Sure, I understand that. We have homeowners that come to us that would like to do some things similar to this in their own properties, and we generally do not allow it.
Mm.
And so that puts us in a difficult position to say, well, I mean, this is a worthy thing. I applaud you, Brendan, for wanting to go out and make these improvements on the existing trails. But it does put us in a difficult position to have to explain to a landowner why we should ignore that this might be a vernal pool and we're going to look the other way, and why we might permit anything actually to happen here. There probably should have been a hearing for the original trail in the first place. So again,
So I'd like to make,
it puts us
I'd like
in a
to,
tough spot, I think.
I think there was, if I've heard correctly, there was a hearing originally when the first
Well, there was.
trail was put in. It's about 50, I believe this is about 15 years old, 10 to 15 years old. But it seems to me that the improvement to the trail is going to get those boards out of the wetland and get them back up.
Well, I'd
You know,
certainly
so-
approve of removing them from the wetland. The question is whether this trail should even be there in the first place.
Well,
I think it's a little late for that now.
it is there.
So what I see is, again, this is an existing trail. It's been there for many, many years. The boards, from what we see here, and this is typically water tables higher at this time of year than you're ever going to see it in summertime, especially in drought. This water is probably not even there. The boards are there for a walkway so that people aren't going through the wetland area here, etc. So I don't have any problem with it. I have a couple conditions that I'd like to place on an approval, though, if there are no further comments. All right, not having any comments, I'd like to make a motion to issue a -3 determination with the following conditions. One is that the chainsaw is only used for the cutting of the fallen tree or dead tree, or the removal of the tree. And then any cutting of a tree is left in place and not hauled off site. As been mentioned, it's fallen trees are good for wildlife habitat. And the second condition is that the replaced decking there, which looks like, I don't know, a 2x10 or a 2x12, whatever it is, that the material not contain any arsenic or chromium, and be of the material be of what was proposed in the application and stated tonight, bearing no chromium and no arsenic material within.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Will.
Will. Okay, thank you. Having heard a motion and a second to issue a -3 determination with conditions, which would allow the project, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Abstain, Tom Bell abstain.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower.
Eric Eisner, aye.
Trish, I saw you came, but I think you were late, so we're going to just pass over if you don't mind. Jay
That's
Pampari
fine.
Jay Pimpare, aye.
and Chris McFarland, aye. So that vote passes 5-0 to 1. 5-0-1. So you're on your way. Thank you, Brendan.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck with your project, Brendan.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
thank
you
you
for
to
your
Charlotte.
comments.
Charlotte
You're
will be
welcome.
watching. Charlotte will be watching you.
Thank you.
course.
She's very
Thank
helpful.
you, Charlotte.
You'll be watching for those spring peepers.
Absolutely.
The next hearing this evening is NOI 22-08, 45 Windy Hill, which includes an addition and mitigation plantings. I'll read it into the record. Notice of public hearing, 45 Windy Hill Road, in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Cohasset Wetlands Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw. The Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 10th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on a Zoom platform for notice of intent 22-08 from Alexander Nicole Berg to construct an addition within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland at 45 Windy Hill Road.
Sorry, give me one sec. So we have Brad Holmes from ECR, and I'll be promoting Alex Berg, the property owner.
Good evening, members of the commission. Brad Holmes here with ECR.
Evening, Brad.
Good evening. Nice to be with you again. Happy almost spring. We've submitted a notice of intent for 45 Windy Hill Road on behalf of Alex and Nikki Berg. Have received a DEP file number. I can share my screen, or Charlotte, if it's easier for you, whatever works better for the commission.
You can
Brad,
share your screen, Brad.
why don't you share in case you want to use your cursor to point out something?
Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can.
Yep.
We submitted a notice of intent application for a proposed addition project at the rear of their house. The site contains a single-family home off of Windy Hill Road with an associated paved driveway, home, deck at the rear, a yard, a swimming pool with patio that leads to the property line, and beyond the eastern portion of the site is Rattlesnake Run. Rattlesnake Run is a USGS map perennial stream, and with that stream comes a bordering vegetative wetland and a FEMA flood zone, and in 100.
Brad, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can you enlarge it just slightly for?
Sure.
Even my glasses aren't helping me here. Thank you.
That help?
Yeah.
Great. So the resource areas that you have on site would be the 200-foot riverfront area, bordering vegetative wetlands, a 100-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetative wetland, and a FEMA flood zone, the bordering lands subject to flooding. What we're proposing is a addition at the rear of the house, shaded here. It occupies a good portion of the existing deck, and it's all within an area of maintained lawn. There is a small proposed bump out of an existing deck at the rear so that it merges into the new addition, and a proposed basement access stairs to get into the new addition. The area of the proposed addition is approximately 456 square feet. And in order to comply with the riverfront regulations and also enhance the buffer zone and bordering vegetative wetland, we're proposing mitigation plantings within the eastern portion of the site. And pull that up on the next image. So that would be the yellow portion of the project is the new footprint proposed at the rear of the house, and the shaded area here towards the wetland and in the buffer zone is the mitigation and enhancement proposal to add native saplings and shrubs within the rear portion of the site. We've crafted the project to comply with the buffer zone regulations from town of Hingham. I'm sorry, town of Cohasset. Didn't mean Hingham. With it so that we avoid any work within the 50-foot buffer zone, and we're also in compliance with the riverfront redevelopment standards. Feel that this project is somewhat minimal in the sense that we're occupying an existing area of lawn and existing deck and redeveloping the site, but also enhancing the site greatly with the overage of enhancement plantings within that eastern portion of the site that abuts Rattlesnake Brook. So I think I'll take any questions you may have and leave that introduction as is.
Or Charlotte, I'm going to ask, have you been out to the site?
I have, yes.
And could you pull up some photographs? And Brad, could you tell us the condition of that 50-foot buffer right now?
Sure.
I do want
Uh,
to say that I did get a chance to coordinate with Charlotte back and forth, and I appreciate Charlotte's help. I wanted to thank Charlotte, on a great job.
Thanks, Brad. Can I share my screen for a sec?
Yes. Would you like me to just stop sharing?
Yes, please.
Can I ask a couple of quick questions in the meantime here, Mr. Holmes? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the only work that's being done is in the 50-foot buffer is the mitigation planting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then is there any work actually being proposed in the 100-foot buffer zone?
The 100-foot buffer zone would be the proposed addition, depending on what the wetland determination would be.
Okay. It did
Just
look
the
like
edge
it was
of it.
out of the 100 on the last plan. It looked like everything was out of the 100.
Correct.
So my next question was, is no work in the 50, no structural work in the 100. You're really just focusing this thing on the 200-foot riverfront area?
Correct. And in compliance with the riverfront regulations, and also to add to this area that you're looking at with supplemental plantings of native to increase the buffer zone and wetland in this area.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Brad, could you tell us what's under the snow right here?
That's basically somewhat of a mulch and herbaceous layer. It's not a lawn area per se, but it's more of a wood chipped, low growing herbaceous area. You can see some of the ground cover kind of popping up through the snow.
Yep.
There's a mix of existing native plantings and landscape plantings in that area. And what we're proposing to do is add to that.
Okay.
Brad, the rather scraggly brush off in the distance. Is that where you'll be working with the new plants in there?
We won't be proposing any plantings in areas that are already vegetated. It's more to supplement the existing open space and also just work with what's there. So it would be, site specific.
It's, Eric, if I'm not mistaken, and Brad, correct me, it's really the area between the swing set and where this picture was taken is the planting area. Is that correct?
That's correct. That open area that you can see that's available to enhance would be the selected area.
Okay.
And one thing I didn't mention is Alex Berg is on as well tonight. I apologize for not introducing homeowner. He's on available as well.
Brad, have you checked your plants against our authorized list of plants to be planted in the prohibited or regulated areas?
I actually did. I actually made sure that the plantings that I selected were from your list.
And I allowed a swamp azalea onto that list many years ago. Did I really? Okay.
Well, I made sure that I was.
That's good.
I knew that was going to be a question, and I made sure I could comply with that.
Well done.
And so Brad, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 1.5 area mitigation. Is that correct?
Well, we have to have, if we're in compliance with the riverfront regs, we have to have a 2-to-1 ratio of mitigation for the 456 square feet.
Okay,
so at least 2-to-1, but we're well beyond that. We're going to cover that whole area, and as I've shaded, the entire area is about 4,400 square feet, but it will be selected within this general area.
Okay. Great. Commissioners, does anyone have any questions or comments?
No comments. I think that this is, again, there's no work being proposed other than the mitigation plantings within the 100-foot buffer zone here. And looking at the riverfront area here, if we apply this riverfront for Rattlesnake Run along Windy Hill and North Cohasset, half of North Cohasset would probably be in the riverfront area. So I think this is probably above and beyond what needed to be done here. And I applaud the applicant and the homeowner for going above and beyond here.
I'd say the same thing, but I disagree with you, Jay, about the extent of the riverfront area. Half of North Cohasset is over the top, I think. It's a 200-foot zone on either side. I'm really happy to see that they're going well beyond the 2-to-1 ratio that is required. And it's a very nice selection, I think, from what I can tell, not being an expert, it's a very nice selection of native plants. So I see this as a very good project. But that doesn't mean that we can forget that there's a 200-foot buffer there. And I think we just need to keep that in mind on all of our riverfront areas. We have seen some, we're going to see more, and hopefully they'll be consistent with what we're seeing here, where the homeowner is doing the right thing.
Good project.
I'll entertain a motion.
Jay Pamparo make a motion to issue a variance for the work at 45 Windy Hill Road.
I'll second that.
Having heard a motion for a variance and a second for 45 Windy Hill Road, we'll take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisen, aye.
Trish Grady,
Grady, aye.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pamparo, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 7-0-0.
Jay Pamparo make a motion to issue an order of conditions for the project at 45 Windy Hill Road.
Could I just give you an order of condition, being that no heavy machinery will be used within the 50-foot buffer?
Sure. Let me amend the motion to issue an order of conditions for the project at 45 Windy Hill Road to reflect a special condition that no heavy machinery or machinery at all that's needs to be human operated, that be allowed in the 50-foot buffer zone.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having heard a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions for 45 Windy Hill Road, we'll take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Trish Grady,
Trish Grady, aye.
Joe Campari,
Jay Pamparo, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 7-0-0.
Thank you very much. Have a
Just
good
wanna
night.
say thank you to everyone. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Congrats, thanks, Alex.
Our next new hearing this evening is NOI 22-09 and Stormwater Permit 22-07 for 171 South Main Street, a garage addition and mitigation planting. Read it into the public record. In accordance with the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, Cohasset Wetland Bylaw and the Cohasset Stormwater Bylaw, the Cohasset Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, March 10th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. via remote participation on the Zoom platform for notice of intent 22-09 from Michael Milanowski to construct a 22-foot by 36-foot garage addition within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland at 171 South Main Street. Okay. Mr. Milanowski.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. If I could, I'd like to just do a quick introduction and overview of the project and then turn the technical aspect over to David Newhall. For background, my name is Michael Milanowski, again, 171 South Main Street. I was actually a member of your commission about 15 years ago when I had hair. And I commend you for what you're doing. My wife and I, we have lived in town and raised our 2 children here in this house. We've now had a change in our household situation with moving in my in-laws, both of them that are both in their 80s. With that, that was due to health issues, and my father-in-law has Parkinson, and it's been a challenge with him getting in and out of the house. And on top of that, my wife, Jenny, has multiple sclerosis and been diagnosed with that for about 20 years. Given the health issues, we really are at this stage of our life where we need to build a garage to have a safer environment for us to be able to enter and exit the house. We've already had several falls. I moved my in-laws in beginning of this calendar year, and unfortunately, we have had several falls in there, including one that was almost like dominoes. My father-in-law went down, my mother-in-law went down, my wife went down, and then the screen door or the glass door popped out. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but I only just bring that to your attention just because we do have a need for this. My house was built in 1790. This area has been, significantly redeveloped. And what I'm proposing is we have looked at other locations on the property, and due to zoning setbacks and the configuration of the house, it really just leads to one option, which we'll be going over. This area is an existing driveway and existing lawn that's been in existence for a long time. It's where I store my boats and other outside storage. David, can you just go on the other aerial where it shows where the boats are all located, or maybe if you can zoom in there? That's hard to see, isn't it? Okay. In the NOI, you actually have some better pictures that can show the area where the proposed driveway extension will be, shows what's the outside storage currently is for the boats, which will no longer be possible with this addition should the commission choose to approve it. Again, what we're asking for is the Concom to approve us locating this addition. It will be within the 50-foot, within 50 feet of the BVW, so will require a variance. As part of the due diligence with this, I did have a pre-consultation meeting with Charlotte, actually met several times. With that, I originally came to her, which is shown in your NOI in the last page of that, with the initial proposal, which was to build a 36 by 36 square foot building that would have utilized the existing driveway and allowed 2 cars to pull straight in. So I would have 4 cars parked within the building. The challenge with that is, as with this whole project, is that that was, I think, within 8 feet, I believe it was, of the BVW, obviously well within the 50 feet. Through conversations with Charlotte, we went back and tried to rotate the building and make it a little bit smaller, which you have here, which in order to do that, instead of the cars entering directly in the driveway straight into the garage, they would have to go on this driveway extension and then turn into the garage, which then extends a pervious driveway that we're proposing. And again, that was part of the pre-consulting work that we did with Charlotte. She was very helpful with that. And again, this is a smaller building that was originally provided. I will say this is that I think after looking at this design and working this design out with the 36 by 22, is that we can actually work with either way, whether we use a smaller building and rotate back to avoid some of this additional driveway extension so it goes right into the garage, or in this version, I'm really open either way, whichever the Conservation Commission wants to go. So with that, I think what I'll do now is just turn it over to David Newhall of Crocker Design Group. He'll go over the technical part and also go over the extensive mitigation that we've proposed in here, as was discussed in our pre-consultation meeting, because again, this will require variance should the commission approve this. And we have provided for some extensive additional mitigation. So with that, David, you're up.
Thanks, Michael. I think you did a good job covering the existing conditions. Like you said, the more technical side of it, for construction access, we're going to use the existing paved driveway to come in here. Any stored machinery overnight would be stored either in the driveway or outside the 50-foot buffer. Down gradient from all the proposed permeable paver driveway and garage addition will have a continuous silt sock to prevent any erosion from going into the existing bordering vegetated wetlands. The proposed mitigation plantings are all plantings from the approved planting list within your bylaw. These are planted at a 2-to-1 ratio from the proposed garage, which is 792 square feet, and we have 1,600 square feet of plantings that extend to really help bolster this buffer area up along here near South Main Street where this wetland extends here. We also have a permeable paver driveway that will infiltrate all stormwater runoff that goes onto this driveway. And also we have 2 stone filter trenches that will take all the roof runoff and then it'll infiltrate that roof runoff into the ground. So both the peak runoff rate and the total volume that goes towards the wetland today in this area will be reduced. All stockpiled materials will be held outside the 50-foot buffer with a continuous silt sock around to, again, prevent any sort of erosion or sediment to run off into the bordering vegetated wetland. With that, I'd kind of like to open it up to any of the questions you might have.
David, if you could, before you do that, could you just show the original we came in with and just for the alternative? Again, just to put everything in perspective, what we started with and where we ended up with. And again, as I said before, I'm comfortable, in rotating this back if that's the direction the commission would like to go, given some of the driveway issues we had to do to make the turning radius to get into the garage in that location.
Just give me 1 second as I pull that up. Oop. There we go. And then this is the alternative addition that Michael was talking about as well, showing the 36 by 36 garage.
And as you can see in there, if I can just point that out, is that was a 2-car garage where the cars would pull in there, so you could fit 4 cars inside there, plus some additional storage on the left. But this original required no additional driveway component to it. What I have found in relooking at this is that 36 depth in that could be reduced. You still need the width to put 3 cars in, but the depth could be reduced, which could push this, maybe 18, 20 feet away from the BVW versus the 10.7 that was there. And again, I only just bring that up is that we're flexible on which way to go. We're just trying to balance, the impacts and what makes more sense, recognizing this is already pre-existing developed area that has been utilized. There's nothing in its natural state that would be disturbed here, with the exception of some temporary disturbances.
I guess my question is, well, first off, Mr. Milanowski, sorry to hear about the health problems within your family. Sorry to hear that. So the plan that we're looking at now, this 36 by 36, which plan are we working off? Because there was a much smaller plan there, the 36 by 25. I just want to know which plan is the revision? Which plan are we working off of?
The one in the NOI, this one.
Okay. Can we just
and again, I apologize, not trying to confuse anybody. I was just trying to show that there's, we can rotate that addition either way with a smaller piece, not the 36 by 36.
Yeah, can we blow that picture up there, please? Or the diagram? Thank you. I mean, I think you realize the big obstacle you have here is working in the 50-foot buffer zone, which has traditionally been considered a no disturbance zone. I don't want to design the project here for you, but it looks like the garage is 52 feet from the edge of road, or at least probably it's the edge of the boundary, so it's further back than that from the road. Has there been any consideration to moving the garage closer to the road, which would take a good portion of that out of the 50-foot buffer zone?
If it moved closer, I think then I lose the ability of connecting it to the house, and how you would be able to go from one section to the other. In order to get into the garage, the door is in the middle of the existing house in order to get through. So it would have to connect at that particular point. To your point, can it be let's just say this, it could be rotated 90 degrees and probably set, let's say, the back of it could be of the way in that side where I was just mentioning. Yeah, right to the left a little bit. We could probably have the back right there and then go forward, which at that point, and doing you could probably get about a 20 foot distance from the BVW.
As far away as you can locate a structure from the BVW is obviously in anyone's best interest. I think secondly here, the next, again, I don't want to tell you how to design the project, but it's just the first thing that jumps out is moving that existing paved driveway over more. I see that the 3-car garage, you're coming into the garage that way. Is there any way to come in straight from the road right into the garage, rather than having to use all that permeable paved area in the resource area?
So I do have my sewer pump, which you see shown on the plan. So, I mean, that is a design point that I have to work around. But I would have to look at that, but maybe that driveway could be shifted over a few feet.
I think, when we have existing, it's difficult when we have existing projects and versus virgin material projects. And here, you have an existing paved road that about half of it is actually right in the 50-foot buffer zone. And, moving a little bit out of the 50, it's kind of like a little bit of give and take we do here sometimes. At the end of the day, where the big question is how much additional impervious area in the 50-foot buffer, and in the 100 for that matter, but let's just focus on the 50 because everything's in the 100. How much additional square footage is actually within the 50-foot buffer of impervious area? And so when you take out some of the existing paved driveway, at times in the past, we have allowed a little bit of give and take here. So it's something to definitely consider.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, we do have a hand raised in the audience. William Taylor, do you want me to promote them to speak, or do we want to encourage them to use the chat feature?
Do we know who they are?
No.
Mr. Taylor, could you please just give us, tell us, are you a neighbor or a butter, whatever, and then we'll Charlotte will let you speak. Yes, no.
Well, while we're waiting for that,
Yeah, why don't we come back, please?
I think Jay's suggestions are really spot on. It looks to me like by moving the driveway to the south and rotating the 22 by 36 foot garage, you probably you're going to be farther away from the wetland. It's not just being in the 50; it's how close that those pavers are to the actual wetland itself.
Mm-hmm.
And by eliminating those, I think even though it is a pervious surface, I think that would be an improvement.
Yeah, and just to feed upon that with the permeable pavers over there, while some may argue that it's a pervious area, water will still infiltrate, there's no impact to the wetlands. I imagine that we're going to have, which is perfectly understandable, cars, vehicles, etc., parked out there
Yes.
overnight, during the day. As you know, cars leak oil, antifreeze, etc. And even though while it might be a alleged pervious area, there's always the potential of fluids, oils, antifreeze, etc., to impact the wetland. And I mean, it's literally sitting right on the edge of the wetland there. So these are things to consider, that I consider as I look at projects like this.
Yeah, so moving it closer to the road, that's a good suggestion. Rotating it 90 degrees, I like that. And scooting that driveway to the southeast looks like you could improve this by doing any of those things. All three of them would be the best, I think, but we're not engineers.
I agree.
And I mean, I know that obviously you want to have the potential addition aesthetically looking pleasing from the road, etc. From looking at it, I don't know how far back it's from the road. It's at least 52.1 feet. Probably looks like it's another 15 feet or so past that. So you've got a lot of clearance there, and I think there's some room for some engineering design to make it a little bit more appealing in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the sewer pump certainly is a constraint there, and so you definitely have to work around that. I can't imagine that you want to move that at all. That would cause a lot of disturbance.
Given the ledge in Cohasset, I'm afraid to dig down 12 feet
Really?
to find another location.
Right.
Well, hopefully you won't find it there. I know the ledge is all over the place, but somebody had to install it at some point in time. So
I think that's the only place they could find.
Yeah.
So these comments are really good, and I agree. And again, this is our first interaction with this, and again, the more we got into looking at this plan, I really wanted to go back to rotate it again, but I wanted to run it by the commission first. I think there is some ability of realigning the driveway and, while still maintaining the curb cut, but adjusting it so it comes a little bit south and out of the 50 foot, rotating the building in 90 degrees and shifting it up a little bit, working around the sewer constraint. And again, I think, as Jay mentioned, is we can get rid of that impervious area. And when I started to look at the details of that and how far we have to dig down to put in all the crushed rock, I was just saying, well, let's get some advice from the commission and we can make these modifications. Is there any other modifications or thoughts that people have in this collaborative process?
The question I had is, are there any trees and being removed as a result of this? I see some stumps on the edge of the driveway, but any trees from the addition or the pavers?
We do have some trees that have been knocked down, and they're at 45-degree angles, 50-degree angles that are shown out there, but nothing of any size. There's some arborvitaes right where some of the pavers would go, but nothing beyond that.
So those 3 trees that are proposed to be removed, those are in the 50, correct?
Those are in the BVW, actually. Yes, and Charlotte, do you have a picture of those?
I do, yes. I can share my screen if you want to stop sharing for a sec. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, these are all Widowmakers.
Sorry, give me one sec.
They got knocked over. I want to say whenever we had that big, they got knocked over. I guess that was early November.
So is there any reason that they need to be removed? Could you leave them there?
I'm not
Yes.
comfortable with that.
Habitat.
I mean, they're pretty, when that falls, that's just dangerous.
Would probably ask you, Mr. Malinowski, if you take it down, is just to leave it there,
Sure.
not move it.
Yeah.
Not use it for firewood? That's fine.
Let it rot.
Okay.
Good for the wildlife.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Charlotte, do you have some other pictures that you can show us of the site? I know you took about 30 of them out there.
I do, yes. Sorry. Zoom out here. I'm gonna go back to the beginning here. So this is the existing driveway.
Yeah.
It has a gate at the edge of where the impervious ends. And then this is the side of the house with the entrance, and then this bump out here is where the proposed addition would go.
Could you point out, I'm sorry, Shar,
Sorry.
to go back, could you point out where the sewer is in that former?
It's not
Go
in
back
this
one more.
picture, but oh, is it right?
Yep, there it is. Right in where all those shrubs are,
Yeah.
that those bushes surround it.
Hmm.
So I do have some room to, to move the driveway over, I'm just gonna guess, maybe 4 or 6 feet, something like that.
Okay.
In
then-
the end, one of the criteria here, Mr. Malinowski, is the amount of new build in the
Mhm.
50 foot. That's always the case. And we've
Right.
seen these before and we've turned a lot of them down. So in a question of fairness to everybody, we have to look at this in a balanced way.
Completely understand. The structure would have been in within that entire fenced in area, just for orientation within the fenced in area.
I'm just scrolling through these if anybody wants me to go back. And then, Michael, it might be good just to mention this in the backyard too, that this is an existing drainage system that goes to the BVW. So I did take some photos of that. And then, of course, there are, obviously existing trees around the driveway, but then just wanted to show the area where the boats were stored currently. Oh, sorry, might be blurry.
Charlotte, what is the existing drainage area to the BVW? Can you explain that?
Yeah,
a little
so
bit
this is this stream that Michael, I believe you said this was historic, that kind of just pumps the water through the backyard parallel and then into the BVW.
Sure, if you could go back to the site plan, I can probably describe it a little
Sure.
bit better.
Sure.
You want me to pull that up or?
Sure, Dave, why don't you do that? So in this property, again, it was built in 1790. And with that, in the main house, there's a sump pump that comes out and I think that's the drain line right there. It goes under the driveway. And then Dave, just scroll down a little bit just so we can show that. The other way, yeah, down or up, I guess, up, yeah. Up the other way. There you go. And that comes in, and with a little jog in the wetlands, that's where that sump pump fills in for drainage in the basement that comes in. Secondly, in the back of the property, the back of the property parallels the railroad tracks. When the MBTA upgraded that 30 years ago, 25 years ago, I guess it is now, is that there was some drainage changes that happened throughout this part of the town into my house and the two neighbors. What happens is any heavy rainfall kind of flows where the proposed silt sock is on the back into where it connects right to the wetlands, and then it washes out. And basically anytime we get, an inch of rain, that'll fill in, and that's just how it drains when they rechange the MBTA track beds back then.
So I think what we've heard here tonight is that the commission is concerned about the pervious surface immediately adjacent to the resource area, and the majority of the garage being within the 50-foot buffer. So I think the consensus is, and correct me if I'm wrong, consensus is that this hearing should be continued, and perhaps you could take a look at ways that you might improve both those situations, including possibly a trading off of existing driveway in the 50 and trading off some of that for getting it out of the 50 to make up for what ends up back in the 50.
Okay, again, not a problem. We'll come back with a revised plan that will, again, address moving the driveway south and eliminating some impervious area in the 50-foot, rotate the building by 90 degrees, and then shift that closer to South Main Street while still connecting to the main house. And any other modifications our engineers can come up with to further enhance the site in between that time frame.
Yeah.
So if we could extend this to your next meeting, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, our next meeting is on March 24th, so we will continue this hearing until then.
And I just want to reiterate for the record, we're not telling anybody how to specifically design the project. We're just obviously throwing out some rough ideas that may help. Our overall goal is to reduce the impervious area in the 50-foot buffer. So while they may have been suggestions, it's not like we're saying if you did this, then the project would be approved. So it just, I think we're just pointing out the obvious. That's all.
Appreciate all the comments.
Thank you.
What is the width of that driveway?
The width of this existing driveway or the proposed
Yeah.
driveway?
Yeah, no, the existing one.
I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it's around 18 feet,
18.
give or take.
Yeah, okay.
But I am confident we can shift it to the south and get some of it out of the 50-foot.
Well, we'll see you on the 24th then.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, thank you, David.
The next hearing this evening is continued from February 24th. It is NOI 22-07 and Stormwater Permit 22-03 at 205 Atlantic Avenue for new construction. So,
good evening. This is Andrew Flynn, the property owner. I just want to say thank you very much to all the commissioners for your time a couple of weeks ago. And thank you to the commissioners for participating in the site visit last Friday. And thanks to Charlotte and certain commissioners who I know have followed up with the Wilkinson design team, our ecological design team on the project. Pleased to have on in the meeting tonight, the team from Wilkinson Ecological Design, Gregory Lombardi Landscape Design, as well as our, architect and Deb Keller from Merrill Engineering. So, thank you for the time a couple of weeks ago and over the past couple of weeks, and we're pleased to be here this evening to continue the discussion.
great. Maybe Charlotte, either Charlotte or someone from the applicant team, if you just bring up a plan so we can take a look again, and if there's any changes or development since last time, you can tell us. Otherwise, I think we're going to jump into some commissioner comments.
Hopefully you can see my screen. This is Deb Keller with Merrill.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Or yes, I was going to say there have not been any material changes since our last meeting to share with you tonight, but we're happy to kind of jump into commissioner comments, whatever would be most helpful.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn, Eric Eisenhower. Question for you, because I came back and I had another look at the plot of land where your Japanese knotweed infestation is. It appears to me that's pretty much flat. Is that true?
Yes, I think there's a slight upgrade slope, but it's pretty it's generally flat. I think that's a fair characterization. It varies a little bit. But.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because in the meantime, I have spent a great deal of time reading through all the NOIs concerning dealing with invasive Japanese knotweed, going back a number of years in Massachusetts. And the way they're dealt with predominantly certainly is with very clinically and professionally administered herbicide in many, many cases, all right? Not just one or two, but many, many. The alternative, it seems, is to take the flatness and turn it to the advantage of taking a more organic approach. And, you know, one is to put into a program, either using black plastic matting, which is laid for 5 years to kill the knotweed, or to put in what I would call a cutting program where it's continually mowed, which is a very effective way of done scrupulously over a period of 3, 4, 5 years. And those might be alternatives to the program that we're talking about now. And I'm not sure whether you've explored those with your people or not, because they're the two were very what I would call organic approaches, which would not involve the use of any herbicides. And have you looked at those at all?
I'll say, Mr. Eisenhower, thank you. You know, I appreciate you taking the time to do the research. And as we know, it is a vicious species, so we're always very open-minded to you know, different remediation approaches. And I'll defer to Ian and the team at Wilkinson.
Seth Wilkinson, Wilkinson Ecological. I'm happy to field that one. We have done some experimenting on organic approaches for Japanese knotweed. I know there's lots of references online. I'm actually not aware of any successful non-organic methods. Typically, because the rhizome is so extensive, with the black plastic method, which is solar sterilization. What you're doing is the way that works for shallow rooted plants is you thermally heat the soils with the heat of the sun to the point where you actually rupture the cellular structure of the root systems. In the process, you do sterilize the soil. Herbicides that would, or fungicides, there are a few fungicides which are usually used for sterilizing soil, but that's generally considered to be avoided at all costs. It can take a long time when soil is sterilized to come back. So it would take a very, very strong chemical to do the same thing that solar sterilization does. And with knotweed, it's not effective because those roots go down 10 feet. So killing the top 6 inches of the roots would not actually kill the knotweed. What it tends to do, and sometimes confuses folks, is it does tend to push the stand elsewhere. So they'll come back and they'll say, oh, look, I put black plastic down here. In fact, my hometown of Orleans, DPW did this, and it went next door, went actually under a public road and popped up in the neighbor on the private property after black plastic was used for a number of years. And it can be effective at moving the stand, but not managing it. Mowing, I've also not seen to be effective, and the impacts of essentially mowing it like a lawn for 5 years in the buffer zone would seem to be quite a bit higher from a wildlife impact than the extremely low dose of herbicide that would be required to neutralize the plant. So we would love to find an organic method. If there was one, we'd be promoting it. But I'm not aware of anything that's been shown to actually be effective at eradicating the stand rather than just sort of causing it to relocate.
I think you ought to look at the literature in greater detail, if I may add, because I certainly have found a number of cases where through relentless mowing, and it's painstaking and it's expensive over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, they've beaten back the Japanese knotweed to a pulp, and it's not moved on anywhere, and it has worked. and they're K
Are these peer-reviewed studies or anecdotal studies? Because I actually I've done this for MACC. I was a board member.
Hold on. These are NOIs, all right, by a non-scientist called Eric Eisenhower, trying to find a way around what could be an insoluble problem. So let's look at it openly, all right? You know, in denying the carbohydrates to the plant by relentlessly cutting it or putting goats in that place, all right? You're going to beat back eventually the knotweed. It may take 3, 4, 5 years, may take 6 years, and takes a lot of perseverance. But the results of the studies that at least were presented in the NOIs that I read were reasonably successful, at least something you could hope for and something you could see as a possible solution if the patience and the efforts and the perseverance were put in.
So we tend to use peer-reviewed journal entries and studies rather than anecdotal concepts. I've researched this extensively. As I was starting to say, I've helped the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions put their whole resource page together on their website many years ago. I've served on the Massachusetts Invasive Plant Advisory Group as a member of that scientific committee. I've got decades of experience in this, and what Cohasset doesn't need is another attempt at an ineffective way to manage knotweed. It's very clear in the biology of this plant that those techniques will be a tremendous wildlife habitat impact for 5, as you say, 4, 5, 6 years. Mowing, goats, those are all goats. Goats have some downsides in their waste products right next to a water body. They're very disruptive. They're non-selective, just like a mower. So you need to consider, as a restoration ecologist, we need to consider all those other techniques. And when we do, we see that the very, very low risk of using a chemical herbicide is much less than what those risks would be.
I beg to differ. I think you have a relatively small plot of knotweed. We're not talking about 100 acres. We're not talking about a mile. We're talking here a relatively small tennis court sized plot, which is relatively flat, which could be mowed easily and cut. And I would put my money on it if it was my property, that over a period of 3, 4, 5 years of relentless work, you could get a good handle on the growth of knotweed by denying it the chlorophyll and the nutrients that are necessary for it to expand and grow. But you have to do it often, and you can't ignore it. All right, and it's expensive.
So I would like to kind of redirect the conversation if we can, because I know that the debate about the control of the knotweed and the restoration is one part of this project. I might note for the commission that in our bylaws and regulations, we actually have limited power as far as allowing alteration in the 50-foot buffer. It may be considered an omission in our bylaws, but it leaves us very little room as far as what we have the purview for removal and changing of an alteration in the 50-foot buffer. So I think we should discuss the rest of the project and maybe keep the mitigation as topic number 3, something to come back to. So maybe I could ask that the next sheet, the development sheet, is pulled up, and see if any other commissioners have any comments regarding the development.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and I want to second the comments about it. What I see is general comments with this project is that I think we ought to just break it up into 3 separate components here. What you have is, because it's a very large project, and as you know, we went out and did a site visit last week or I forget the date offhand, but I want to let everyone know for the record, there were commissioners out that did a showed up for this scheduled site visit. What I see here is you have a single family home. You have a driveway leading up to a single family home, which is all outside of the 50-foot buffer. And I think we should, if we're going to discuss this application, break it down into three components. One is the driveway, the parking area, and the house, all of the work that's outside of the 50. The second component I see here is the work that's being done within the 50. And a large component of that is the tennis court, which I did learn a little bit more about the tennis court and the expectations of that as a result of the site visit. I would like to learn more about that, how that is going to be refurbished, if it's going to be repaved, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, the mitigation project, which we jumped right into, and that aspect of it. So I'm happy to answer, to go back to the first portion of it, I think is procedurally here. So we have some control. We focus in on the house and the driveway, so we're not jumping all over the place here. And so my first comment on the excavation, and I asked this at the last meeting and the site visit, is how many yards of material are going to be removed from that site as a result of the excavation to get down to the, I guess it's 21-foot elevation?
So
Is that, or Deb, I can touch on that. And Jay, I appreciate, and I think the way you outline those three, the three components there, that's probably an effective and practical way to walk through the discussion here. I think with regards to the first piece, which is the house and the driveway, as we discussed briefly last time, the key principle of the whole design here was to keep everything outside of the 50, which I think we've managed to successfully do, and to keep as much of it out of the 100 as possible, which I think per the site plan we've really endeavored to do so. And I think we're kind of humbly pleased that we managed to keep the large bit outside of the 100 as well. And we did that also with regard to the driveway by utilizing the existing curb cut, utilizing kind of the existing cleared area that goes up to the driveway and the parking area. And with regards to the excavation, are you looking for the cubic yards within the 100 or on the site in general?
Well, I mean, this within the 100-foot buffer, but I'm also concerned about the elevation as far as from a homeowner's perspective. As I think the back elevation is almost at 40 feet there. You're talking about a 20-foot cut out of the call it whatever you want, the hill, the mound, whatever it is. That's a significant cut there. And are there going to be foundation drains, roof drains, et cetera? And I just want to hear about that. And again, how many yards of material are being brought out of there, which will lead me to my next question: is how is it going to be removed? Is it going to be stockpiled? I don't know where you're going to stockpile that on the site without being in the 50. So, questions to how you're going to remove all the fill. I'm sure you're probably going to want a little bit of the fill for you're going to use some of your cut for your fill, but certainly not all of that material, but it's got to be hauled off that site somehow.
Right. And I think we could follow up with the amount of excavation that's going to be done, inside the 100. I don't know if we have that number this evening. And we've also taken up on your suggestion to kind of further design, advance the design of potential foundation drains. So I think that's something we could follow up with you on in terms of we're not quite there yet on the advancement of that design, but I think we certainly heard your comment and your suggestion at the last meeting. We've been working through initial CMP plans with the GC, and the plan would be, again, to utilize the existing curb cut and the driveway and really use that as the access point to haul all of it off site. And the idea is the trucks would stay, purely on that driveway area. They would be outside of the 50, and they would likely be backing the driveway and having the excavator go right into the trucks and hauled off site. So as you say, there may be small portions that are retained on site for certain fill areas, but the intent, and again, this has kind of been part of the thought, the design and the construction logistics from the beginning is really utilizing that driveway access point for the hauling of off-site material.
And so, let's talk about the stormwater calculations a little bit. And Charlotte, I don't know if one of the questions I had was the pre and post conditions. Do they match up or improve the site? Where are we with stormwater calculations? Have you had a chance to review those in depth?
Sorry, Mr. Vice Chair, are you asking me or the engineer?
Well, I guess whoever wants to tackle that one.
Okay.
But, feel free to if you.
Sure, I can start. Deb, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at the moment with the site plan we have now, we have not yet met standard 2. I believe some of the peak rate post-construction values were just a tad higher.
They are, but I would say that we are generally meeting it because this is a coastal project, and reading the bylaw, we are not discharging to a critical area that's identified in the bylaw. Although, as we've discussed this earlier, you had mentioned this comment, I have looked back at it. We can make some modifications if the commission is more comfortable with us meeting those. I think there's only 2 storm events that were off. One was off for peak, one was off for volume. So it is a minor tweak, which I would like to do within the rain garden, expanding it slightly in this location here where it's somewhat flat, give us a little bit more storage, which would let us meet those if that's what the commission would like us to do. Although I would state that, again, we are coastal, so that we don't technically have to meet it. I did reread that section. I think there were specific areas in Cohasset where you require it. Since we're discharging to the Atlantic Ocean, I don't believe that was identified as one of the critical areas. But as we were speaking at the last meeting, I think there were concerns, some habitat in Little Harbor. So maybe we can look into that and address that if that helps.
Yeah, that would certainly help me.
Okay.
Thank you. I think it'd be hard. We've had this on other projects. It'd be hard pressed to approve a stormwater plan where post conditions were higher than preconditions, regardless of the criteria.
Particularly with regard to sediment discharge, as we spoke about on the site visit, this is a really almost unique environment on the South Shore with such a healthy blue mussel population, and they're particularly susceptible to sedimentation. So capturing all of that sediment, I know
Right.
the standard is 80%, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is 80% that has to be
Yes.
captured. And so that's a particular concern, and given the a very likely change in the definition of what a 100-year storm is going to be in the pretty near future, it'd be really nice to see this come in well below those discharge limits, at least for sedimentation.
We are meeting the sedimentation TSS, the rain garden with the pea stone diaphragm along here, as well as the trying to flatten out the slope here prior to the rain garden. Rain gardens typically are assigned a 90% TSS removal rate. So even our subsurface chamber system, any overflow from that would be discharged. So all of the runoff would be running through the rain garden prior to discharge to the ocean. But we're happy to look into additional if we can come up with something that would be encourage more removal.
Is that rain garden being built on fill, or
No,
it looks like it's been elevated? So how much?
it's not being, it's actually slightly excavated into grade, and there is a small fill just to create that low berm on the backside. That is all.
And I don't, have you done a test pit there, or any test pits in that area?
Unfortunately, the weather hasn't allowed us to yet, but we are scheduling that to get some confirmation test pits out on site.
So I recall when we were walking on the beach that we did see areas of exposed bedrock, not very far from there, actually. And so it led me to wonder how much soil cover there actually is. And it's not actually even soil, it's sediment, and it's fairly coarse. So anything that goes into that rain garden, unless it's properly constructed with some fabric and an appropriate fill material,
It has a,
a good load of carbon material for decomposition, then you may have a problem there. So I'd sure like to see a test pit done.
Yes.
Probably two of them, one at that southern lobe and one at the northern lobe. To
Okay.
get some notion of what that subsurface looks like. And I know that you're supposed to be 2 feet above groundwater, but if in fact you are only 2 feet above bedrock, that's another story altogether, because then there's no place for it to infiltrate. It's going to go right on top of that bedrock and ride the surface of that bedrock right on down to the beach. So I think you guys need to investigate that a little further.
Yes.
You may find that you have to move that rain garden someplace else. I shouldn't say that. I mean, let's get some data first.
Absolutely.
And see where we're at after that.
And to Tom's comment about the test pits, that was another question I had. I certainly would like to see the test pit under the proposed infiltration chamber that's right there in the middle of the driveway.
Yeah.
I know that clearly, we typically require test pits of the home as well. Given that you're going to be excavating 20 feet of a fill over there, I think you're going to get your money's worth of excavation out of there. But typically, we'd like to see it in the home as well.
Okay. Something that popped in my head that I just wanted to mention too, that we had spoken about with regard to construction and erosion control on the site. We show sort of the lower limit in the red dashed line here. We will be adding, as mentioned at the previous hearing, an additional row of erosion control, sort of following sort of the demarcation between the single family home work and the restoration work if as we move forward. So I wanted to let you all know that we will be adding that to the plan.
I would propose that you recommend you put it right on the 50-foot buffer just outside of the tennis court area.
I'd like to see photos of when you've got your test pit excavated. I'd like to see photos of the profile.
I'm a licensed soil evaluator as well, so I'll probably be the one that goes out there, just so you know that we're not just digging a hole and filling it in. Just to let you know.
Yeah, great. And I would also hope that you would leave it open for at least 24 hours, if not 48 or 36, to get an accurate estimate of the water level and not just depend on modeling. Like to see how that fills up.
I will double check. That's almost a liability issue to leave it open, but I'll see what we could do there. Maybe we can cover it so that it's not a safety issue. So
I think you can probably put temporary fence around it.
A lot of excavators won't do that.
Put some plywood over it.
Yeah, a steel plate, something else. So I'll check into that to see if we can do something to that effect.
Has there been a plan submitted that shows the different drainage areas on this site, pre and post?
I do have one in the stormwater report. It wasn't in the actual plan set that I have attached here.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. But you do have one in the documents.
Pre and post?
Pre and post, yes.
Okay, and do you know off the top of your head to explain to us
Absolutely.
the drainage off the, well, two areas. One is obviously around the back side of the house and down towards the road.
Yep.
The other would be the actual parking court.
Okay, so there is a high point just to the right, and we added some topo on the watershed plan so that we could break it out properly. A high point right about here, which splits the two watersheds. So you come right through the slope here. I'm guessing a little bit. We have a little berm here.
Yep.
As to what flows towards Atlantic. It kind of breaks off again over here. As this does flow down to Atlantic Ocean and, sorry, Atlantic Ave is what I meant to say earlier. So you have just this small wedge here that ends up flowing towards the street. Everything else flows towards the ocean itself. And again, it does, you're right, it's very steep, flows to the tennis court. The tennis court does pitch about a foot grade difference, amazingly enough. It's 21 on the high side and approximately 20 on the down gradient side. So it does slope across and then down into Atlantic Ocean. So that's, but we did add some of the offsite watershed here that does come onto our site before it flows off to discharge off property. So that was the existing. And then for proposed, we're maintaining the same high point, but obviously it will come across and break with basically this corner of the house where this side does pitch and slope around and over the tennis court and down the side here. And this side does run from grade. We have some spot shots where this is high and it slopes across here, dropping down. Again, this is the, I think, the deepest excavation area here as you move along here, and it will wrap around. And this is the area that does flow onto Atlantic Ave. So what we have done is the Atlantic Ave discharge point does meet both peak rate and volume. So we're reduced in proposed conditions from existing conditions, where, as we were previously speaking, the increase in the peak rate and volume that we saw in a few storm events were the discharge towards Atlantic Ave only. So with that being said, we are capturing the entire roof system into the subsurface chamber underneath the auto court or our driveway here with an emergency overflow, so that we located this so that any discharge from that system would flow and make it into the rain garden prior to, rather than just sending it off and discharging it directly to the beach. So that's
Ms. Keller, obviously, if excavating as deep as you're going to excavate, you're going to go through the water table. And I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I would think on the high side, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're essentially creating a dam here in the water table, and I just wonder what's going to happen here as it flows to the south along that western side of the house, whether you're going to develop a spring somewhere along here, and then that's going to discharge onto Atlantic Avenue. And I just wonder if you've given that any thought.
We are working through that with a foundation drain system. So we will have that, be able hopefully to address that hopefully at our next meeting, and discuss how the foundation drains will integrate into the design of the building and have those discharged. So we aren't discharging water out onto Atlantic Ave, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a tricky thing. I mean, we don't have any authority to speak very much about groundwater, if I'm not mistaken. But if, in fact, by interrupting the flow of groundwater, you create new discharge before it leaves the property, I'm not sure how we're supposed to deal with that. And it seems like it would come out somewhere very near that boundary, that 100-foot buffer boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just encourage you to take a close look at
Yeah.
how you're going to interrupt that groundwater and where you're going to divert that water
Direct
to, rather than just let it go its own way. Because
Sure.
I can tell you as a hydrogeologist, I can see right where it's going to come out. And that's probably not
Yeah.
going to, it's not going to be what you're going to want, Mr. Flynn. You're not going to want to have a spring just to the west of your swimming pool and discharging down to the street. So
Yeah, we would.
I'd encourage you to look at that and consider the implications for the groundwater seriously. With such a deep excavation, it's definitely going to interrupt whatever flow there is now.
So
I also wonder if the house itself isn't splitting this drainage plane, or I don't know the proper terminology, but you split the site pre-construction into two pieces, and yet the house is splitting it into more pieces post-construction. So it seems that although the overall discharge might be less, it seems that the exact point that Tom is talking about, possibly picking up groundwater, might actually be quite a bit more. And I wonder if that shouldn't be studied a little more in depth, that south flowing drainage area doesn't get split up into different areas. Because what I see based on the drawing that I see right now, I see a fairly large area draining to the south, which now is being funneled down the driveway and down the west side of the house. And it seems that we might run into some problems there.
So this portion here is already draining towards Atlantic Ave. So what
Yes.
we're doing.
I understand that it's draining towards Atlantic Ave, but what I'm concerned about is that it's pre-construction, it's draining as a very broad plane, but post-construction, it's draining as two small planes, one being the driveway and one being the westernmost edge of the site. And I'm wondering what kind of problems that's going to create.
Well, we can look, I think if I understand correctly, more that we're channelizing the flow rather than having it be more open sheet flow across the whole frontage is what
Yeah.
I think you're saying, yeah. So we can look at that with respect to the flow coming down through here. Again, the driveway itself, we do have a little swale here. So this is not going into Atlantic Ave, and we have a little berm here so that we make sure that we're capturing all of the driveway on site and sending that over here. So you're just looking at the yard area here and this, but we can definitely look into that.
What's the material on the driveway?
Right now, it's proposed as a bituminous driveway. It has about a 10% grade coming up into the court. So, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, you were open if there's interest in looking at different surfaces, but.
Yes, I think that's right. I think we're, we can reflect further on other, alternate materials that may work in the driveway there.
I think it might be, I think you might want to consider more than just a swale across the driveway, depending on what material it is. That maybe there actually is a trench drain at some point to actually make sure that water's not going to head out the wall. Yeah.
Or a metal grate, a 4 or 6 inch metal grate at the bottom of the driveway.
Oh, a trench drain, such?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
With just a metal grate cover.
Mhm.
You're going to have some significant velocity going down at 10% grade. And it's not going to linger on that berm. It's going to go right over it probably.
Well, it is flattened out a little bit here. The goal was to try to make a sump bit primarily in the driveway right in here so that you wouldn't have that. It's about a 3-inch berm on the backside, but we can look into a trench drain as well, and maybe even something to consider here would be maybe a berm along the property to kind of direct more water towards the rain garden rather than to Atlantic Ave. With a trench drain, you could have an opportunity for to recharge back into the ground as well, and have, you know, any overflow end up being directed in that direction.
I mean, that's working to your advantage too. If you can capture that rainwater, you're going to be using native plants, and to the extent that you can capture that water and move it to the north and east, that's just going to make your planting plan work a lot better, I would think. But you are going to have a significant, I think you're going to have a significant amount of water dammed up behind that house. And again, you know, if you have, you're going to level it, so you have an opportunity to actually move water from the southwest side there to the northeast side, perhaps.
Yes.
And you do have more room over there to infiltrate it, maybe.
We can definitely look into options of trying. Yeah, I kind of like the stone trench. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, Andrew, but you know, small stone trench, being able to capture and recharge along the property line and have the overflow come into the rain garden as mentioned. I can definitely look into that.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I think those are all very helpful comments, and I think some of the dynamics that you're pointing out, you know, perhaps allow Deb and I and the team to investigate further and see what we can design.
One question I have on the north-facing side of the house there is the proposed stockpile area. If you move down more to the left, there you go. Yep, right there. It seems to be the high point of the entire site. I know it says final location to be determined prior to construction. I don't know how you're going to stockpile any material there, because you're going to be cutting out that whole area. So to my point earlier about, you know, where is the stockpiling going to be, etc. It'd be great if that was on the map as well. And in addition to that, it would be great to outline a concrete truck washout area, because clearly the trucks are going to need a washout area, and we want to try and keep that washout on site as much as possible.
Okay. So I envisioned this stockpile, even I apologize, it says stockpile. I don't see it as a soil stockpile area. I looked at it more for materials, maybe a pipe or anything of that nature. It is
raw materials.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because again, Andrew was mentioning that we are working with a general contractor to get more details on a construction management phasing. You know, our initial thoughts were a lot of the material will be hauled off site that can't be held on site. So,
right.
But we will be looking into opportunities of where we could maybe store stuff that, you know, unfortunately, every time I look,
Deb, I can, you know, the other piece that's relevant here from a CMP plan, and I don't want to speak too formally about it, but you know, the neighbor to the left, you know, in terms of in this plan, kind of to the northwest, you know, there are access points there, which are obviously completely outside, you know, the 100, and you know, there's ongoing discussions with those neighbors, you know, in a friendly manner, just about some kind of reasonable access points and, you know, reasonable areas for lay down and staging and things like that. So obviously the driveway will be the main point of access and the main artery in and out of the site, and, you know, outside, that'll obviously be outside of the 50. And then there will likely be some ancillary staging areas that will be, you know, not on this plan that we're looking at today, but more so kind of from a neighbor relations dynamic to the north and the west.
Yeah, I think you're going to need that as well.
Right.
And obviously it's all out of the 100-foot buffer. So It's out of our jurisdiction.
Sounds like a great opportunity, Andrew.
So I'd like to just add two comments. Well, I guess we're still outside the 50-foot buffer, but I'm going to move us into the 50-foot buffer. I mean, if we don't discuss the removal of invasive species and remediation planting, then the reason for being, there is no reason for being in the 50-foot buffer. So I would ask you to look at your rain garden and your contouring and see if you can't tighten that up and actually consider leaving the 50-foot buffer as a no disturb zone, which is what our bylaws call for it to be. You know, I think that you know, many of these contours could very easily kind of get pulled back, you know, tightened up, pulled back. You say you're thinking about adjusting the rain garden anyway, so, you know, I kind of suggest looking at that a little more closely and tightening it up. And that's on both ends. I think it's quite possible. I also think that the removal of trees is also something that we're not, you know, it's not something we want to see in the 50-foot buffer as well. So, you know, I'd recommend that trees are not just taken down because of a desire to either move earth or because a certain tree doesn't want to be there. I think it's probably wise to get an arborist report so that I know you've got, it looked like you had staked those trees or someone had marked those trees, an arborist had marked those trees, but I'm not sure there's a convincing, or maybe it hasn't been explained convincingly that specific trees should be removed for specific reasons. And maybe that's something that we can go into at the next meeting. If in fact someone's actually analyzed all those.
Sure, so I can touch on that briefly and we can maybe get into it in more detail in the next meeting. But we have inventoried all of the trees. We had an arborist inventory each of the trees. At the moment, there's only 4 trees within the 50-foot buffer that are being removed that are not either dead or not Norway maples. And I believe, and perhaps Troy from Lombardi can correct me, I believe we're replacing 8 or 9 trees back in the 50-foot buffer.
Yes, there are actually 8 trees in the 50-foot buffer. And to Andrew's point, yes, the submitted plans, and then there's a following plan, is a list that was developed by Bartlett Tree Services, and we had them tag and identify and grade the trees that you see on site that are above the caliper inches that are in your purview. And this list that is on screen right now kind of makes up all those tagged trees.
Okay. We'll have to spend more time with this, I think. I mean, again, you know, the health of a tree, you know, there's nowhere in our bylaws that suggests that because the health of a tree is compromised in the 50-foot buffer that it needs to be removed. Obviously, if there is a safety concern, then we'll have to look at that as well. But we should take a look at these a little more closely.
Yeah, I believe in Massachusetts that there's a requirement when a property is owned, if a certified arborist deems the tree is greater than 50% dead, it becomes a potential liability and then it falls onto the homeowner's responsibility to manage that liability. I don't know how that is superseded by trees inside of a buffer zone, but I do know that we are part of those conversations quite often with a lot of our projects that we work on.
So I just want to chime in here to the chairman's points about removal of invasive or trees that are healthy in the buffer zone, etc. I have to be honest with you. I have a hard time supporting this this restoration project. Yeah, for the work that's done within the 50-foot buffer zone. You know, I've gone through our wetlands rules and regulations here there numerous times, and it's been pointed out in the past. There makes no mention to even the word invasive or invasive species, and makes no mention to the point of removal of even dead trees in the 50-foot buffer zone are allowed. Never mind removal of perfectly healthy trees. What our bylaws do say is there should be no alteration in the buffer zone. And I just want to read the definition of alter on page 3 of our Cohasset Wetlands regulations. And alter means to change the condition of the area subject to protection under the state act and or local bylaw. Examples of alteration, I won't read them all, but one is the destruction, removal, or any temporary or permanent change of vegetation. So this is a very large restoration project. I appreciate the fact that there may have been other projects done around the state of Massachusetts, on the Cape, etc. The town of Cohasset has not had any of these. I've been on this commission for 8 years, and I've never seen any large restoration projects along of this nature that we have approved and considered. So I have a hard time with that. Our bylaws give us the power to not allow any disturbance in the buffer zone. This is a clear major alteration of work in the buffer. And look, this is an amazingly beautiful piece of property. I think everyone in Cohasset you have to have driven by this property if you live in the town. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of property around. I'm sure that if a home is going to be built there, it is going to be a beautiful home. It's still going to be an incredibly beautiful site, etc. I don't see that that this giant restoration project, in my mind, is warranted. Also, section 39 of our bylaws don't allow the herbicide or pesticides application, and that's specifically stated in section 39 of our bylaws. So I just have a really hard time supporting the restoration project of that, and I just want to throw that out there.
Sure, and Jay, I appreciate the perspective, and I think we certainly understand that, and we've endeavored to be thoughtful. And I think in our last meeting we talked about approaching this site as a bit of a mosaic, where there's certain things that get improved in certain areas, certain things that are left undisturbed in other areas. And I think, I don't want to speak on anyone's behalf, but it seemed as though there was some support for maybe replenishing with native species, areas where this kind of incredibly invasive knotweed and certain other elements are. And I understand that, invasive and knotweed don't live in the bylaws. So, I think we're very open to a discussion on it. For sure. I'd hope that it's maybe that there's a balance that we could find, or at least a balance that we could explore. Because, I think the knotweed is incredibly thick, and it's incredibly, it's incredibly resilient, and it also, will likely expand at some point. So I think, I think the team we brought in from Wilkinson, they have incredible, they're the renowned folks. They've done a lot of, really interesting projects. And they often leave these areas better than they found them. So, I understand, and I realize we're not going to solve it all tonight, but I'd ask for maybe just a degree of open-mindedness on it. But I hear you loud and clear that the less disturbance or no disturbance within the buffer zone is the goal. I know, as we've seen in other projects, folks do put structure and other things inside the 50. And of course, we're not suggesting any of that here. So I just, I know how hard Seth at Wilkinson and the Lombardi team have worked to be thoughtful about this. And I just ask that maybe we keep that discussion open, but I hear you loud and clear in terms of, your perspective on it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I mean, again, I'm only one vote. I'll continue to have an open mind. And, we're not going to vote on this project tonight. There's too much going on. I would prefer to see less disturbance or very minimal disturbance. If I were to entertain any work in the 50 for removal of vegetation, it certainly wouldn't be any healthy trees, regardless of whether it was invasive or Norway maples, whether it was invasive or not. It wouldn't really matter to me. I know we're all trying to make it look beautiful. We've all come around that corner and seen that site over and over. I think as I understand, in order to do this project, it looks like there would be upwards of, you know more on the numbers, but 12 to 18 to potentially up to 2 feet of fill being cut out of that. Because let's face it, it's a rocky area. You're not just going to pull the invasives out and then go plant something there. So there's going to have to, that whole area in the 50 there is going to have to, you're going to have to bring in fill and fill that area. So, I mean, I'll continue to keep an open mind. I'm only one vote. I have a tough time with the extensiveness of this up front of the restoration project.
Andrew, can you talk about the tennis court a little bit and what your plan is for that?
Sure. So, the plan is really to leave it as is, simply kind of resurface it in kind, not any worse off than it is today. It's slightly, it's a bit outdated and kind of run down. I think something we're looking to improve and mitigate is there's currently probably a 50-foot tall chain link fence there, which I just think, it can be improved with a probably lower profile fence, maybe with some more organic materials, a little more thoughtfully conceived. So I think our hope is to lessen the profile of the tennis court in general. And from a surface standpoint, it would simply be kind of a repair and resurface, but we're not looking to add any program there, really change the conditions in any way, any negative way.
Would you ever consider removing it to improve the 50-foot buffer?
That's not something we've thought about at this time.
What would resurfacing look like, and would it be an option to have an impervious surface? I don't know much about tennis courts, but is that an option?
That's something we could research. I don't know. I'm not in a position to comment on that. I have to say I haven't seen an impervious surface either, but I think would want to make sure that whatever we do, we don't disrupt the area by kind of replacing or changing the existing conditions to any meaningful degree. But I think, for the next meeting, would be happy to explore some different treatments for the tennis court. I'm probably slightly underinformed on those at the moment.
Andrew, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing you've asked of us, which is to keep an open mind. I think your team from Wilkinson would tell you that piece of 50-foot buffer could be reclaimed the same way as the area of knotweed. So in your exploration, I'm going to ask that you keep an open mind and consider that as well.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, yes, that's very fair, and I will we'll keep in mind on that, and we'll kind of take that away and reflect further, and we'll do a bit more research as well, and we'll come back and report back.
And then one more question about the tennis court. Is that area included in the stormwater area of disturbance? I was wondering, because I was trying to, I think it was like 39,000 square feet that was included in the area to be disturbed. I was wondering if that area is included.
It was not, because it's existing conditions. So I believe the 3,900 would be proposed increase in impervious, if I recall the numbers correctly. but we did include it in the stormwater calculations as an impervious surface.
Okay. Mr.
And
Flynn.
I would say that I'm sure at one point it was a very beautiful tennis court. It's a very large tennis court. And looking at the size of the court and the slope off to the beach area, it's a fairly substantial slope. One might want to consider, pulling the court back a foot or two and allowing for some, I know there's already a slope there. It seemed like I didn't see the slope, but on the map, there's a slope, and allowing for the retention of some water to not go over the bank. I actually don't know how you're going to construct that and cut that all out and repave it without stabilizing that bank anyway, because it's a clear drop off at the edge of the pavement there. So one to consider is, cutting that back a couple of feet and still having a very large size tennis court.
I wonder how many times that tennis court's been flooded, Jay. All right, because if you were putting a clay court, you'd probably find there wasn't much clay there after nor'easter, I would think. But Mr. Flynn, let me just say one thing, and you need to keep an open mind on this question of invasives, because the fact is, in my 5 years, we have never approved of the use of a herbicide. Zero. These are the facts, and you have to keep those in mind when you look for your technical solutions. And this is the kind of baggage that we bring, to this decision-taking process. All right.
Absolutely, Mr. Eisenhower, and I appreciate it. And I think your suggestions earlier, I'll take those away with Wilkinson. I know, they spoke to their own experience and perspective, and we can review some of the other methods as well, and back to the table.
Has any I know that Tom Bell brought up the point of the blue mussel habitat immediately. I can't say it's on your property. It might be on your property. I'm not sure where the line exists, but has any habitat study been done on the property, kind of in total?
I can't say a full habitat study has been done. We've done, we had the arborist there. Obviously, Wilson has done their full inventory. So I think we have a lot of the component parts.
Well, I would recommend that it not hold us up at a later date, that you'd want someone to take a look, whether it's nesting shorebirds, the mussels, the
salamanders, or whatever.
Yeah, as well as the ground animals that are in that area. So I think that's important. Jay, I know you've been through this before with other projects. And I don't know what the extent of it is, other than maybe the need to identify any critical habitat. I'm not sure. Anything, maybe a look at what the impact on habitats would be as well.
And that would be within the 50.
Well, I think so our purview extends to the 100-foot. Now, typically the area between the 50 and the 100-foot only comes into play if, in fact, it's creating an impact on either the inner buffer, the 50-foot buffer, or the resource area itself. But part of that is wildlife habitat in that area. So the question is the activity within the 100 seriously impacting what's basically downhill of it? So I think it needs to be looked at. I mean, I don't suspect anything in particular, but I think it's Tom Bell, and Tom, you can weigh in. You know more than I do, but obviously, if there's, you said it was sedimentation that causes the concern for the mussels. Obviously, if the water is channelized in any place other than those I mentioned earlier, and it's actually bringing sediment into the water, then that could impact the habitat within the resource area. So I think it's worth a look to some levels to make sure that what being proposed isn't going to adversely affect it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the at least the assessor's boundaries of the lot, and they don't extend actually. I thought all of these extended to the middle of the channel, but they don't.
No,
So,
mean high.
yeah. But that doesn't mean that we can ignore any impact to wildlife here, and it probably is advisable to have a wildlife study here. It is a very sensitive area, and the issue, as I understand it, I'm not a marine biologist, but I do have some familiarity with what they do, and it just seems to me that a wildlife study would be a good idea, so that we don't get down the road and find that there is an impact. That would be a real tragedy here if in fact this resource was adversely impacted. And DMF, their shellfish division, they do sample here. They're well aware of this place. They're very familiar with it. They've been sampling it for decades. And I don't know that you need to contact them. There's probably no regulatory requirement that you do, but perhaps a practicing professional wildlife biologist who is familiar with shellfish should have a look at it.
I think, yeah, I think we can consider that, and I think we'd like to follow up maybe with Charlotte to understand the scope of that a bit better. And is that a customary request, or there's some precedents that maybe could be shared with us?
Well, we do have jurisdiction to require wildlife studies, and I believe they do extend off the property.
Understood. I just didn't know if there were recent examples that could maybe be shared with us, just for our
I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we've had such a cluster of shellfish that we're aware of. In Little Harbor, I'm sure they're just as thick as they are out here. Not mussels, but the clams, and they're just sort of out of sight, out of mind. But perhaps we should be looking more closely at that with other applicants that are requesting alterations to their property adjacent to Little Harbor and Cohasset Harbor and stuff. But I mean, this is a right in your face kind of situation. And as I said, the wildlife biologist that was collecting material exclaimed that this was really almost a unique resource now. Just by chance, I was having a conversation with the conservation commissioner or conservation agent for Hull, who has been involved in a long-term study of blue mussels from the Massachusetts border with New Hampshire all the way down to somewhere around Nahant, I believe. And he was remarking that how in his 20 years of monitoring these mussel beds, they've literally disappeared. And so we don't want that to happen here. And I'm sure that there must be a means of, no matter what they find, there must be a means of protecting this without a huge sacrifice on your part.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, we'll follow up to explore that further and understand what the scope would consist of.
Yeah.
Jay, we lost Jay for a minute. I think Jay's the only person on the commission who's actually been through a project where a wildlife habitat study was conducted. So Jay, maybe you could just give Charlotte a little background and she can pass it on to the applicant.
Okay, happy to do so.
Okay, so
does that flowing water constitute a river?
No.
Trying to look at it.
No. I checked closely, and the state has pretty well defined that, and that salt ponds connecting to the ocean, their channel here is not considered a river, so it's not covered by the River Act. Now,
So
if
just to jump back-
if they drawn a river mouth across it, then it would be, but they haven't, and they've certainly drawn a river mouth across the Gulf River. So they've obviously had a look at our town and made a decision about this.
Jay, were you gonna say something?
I was just going to say, for the next hearing, to jump back to the tennis court a little bit, I think the expectation is to get a more in-depth plan to talk more about the excavation, whatever, revampment of the tennis court, cut, fill, etc., and all of that in-depthness. And looking again, at the existing tennis court, and the only reason I think we're having this discussion is because it's an existing structure that's there now. And while our bylaws don't say anything is typically grandfathered, historically, this commission has looked favorably upon revisions or changes to existing structures. So if you want to pay close attention to the closeness to the coastal bank there, and I certainly would want to see something very in depth on how this tennis court is going to be maintained, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. We will come back with more detail on the tennis court and our approach there for the next meeting.
So is this a good point for everyone to agree to a next meeting on March the 24th?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so this hearing is now officially continued till March the 24th.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate the time,
you.
the
Thank
feedback,
you.
and the comments. We look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next hearing is continued from February 24th. It's NOI 22-05 and Stormwater Permit 22-02, 136 Atlantic Avenue, for a pool and pool house. Who do we have, Charlotte?
We have Caroline from Cavanero, and Caroline, I did promote Ethan, so we'll see if he jumps on in a second.
Great. For the record, my name is Caroline Reese from Cavanero Consulting in Norwell, Massachusetts. I am representing the applicants and homeowners of 136 Atlantic Avenue for a proposed pool, patio, and pool house project located in the rear of their property. Before we go on, I believe John Zimmer's on the phone as well, or on this call.
Oh, yeah, there
If
is.
you don't mind promoting him.
Yes.
This has been a continued meeting to address concerns about potential vernal pools in the wetland areas. And we had a few action items from last meeting. One is a report from John Zimmer, and I think I'll pass it to him shortly to speak to that if you like. And secondly, I made some minor revisions to the site plan and added some plantings based on John Zimmer's findings. And if there aren't any questions, I guess I'd hand it over to John at this point. If there are questions for me now.
Nope, that's great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. For the record, John Zimmer with South River Environmental. At the last hearing, we walked through a little bit on, potential vernal pool ecology and upland dispersal habitat and things like that. And that the commission requested a report from me walking through the habitat that's potentially present within the property and an analysis as to whether or not the project would have an adverse impact on the potential vernal pool habitat or its associated 100-foot buffer zone. So I prepared a report to that effect. I'm not sure if the commissioners have had a chance to look at it. I can walk through it if you'd like, or I can answer questions if you've all had a chance to read it. Happy to do it either way.
I read it, and I think it's a good report. I think it was pretty thorough. Obviously, I think you made a good point of the diminutive status of what actually is happening in the zone. I'm still concerned that is a vernal pool, and would like to know one way or the other. But in terms of what you've proposed, it looks reasonable to me.
Okay, and I did get a chance to go back out. Tom, one of the things you had mentioned was about the vernal pool habitat with respect to the BVW boundary.
Right.
And I did look at that, and it is, for all intents and purposes, concurrent with the BVW line. There's maybe a couple feet here and there where it differs, but your analysis on the confined basin depression was pretty spot on.
Yeah. So I don't think I had any real objections to that line being the margins of the vernal pool. So in terms of the locations of the buffers, I wouldn't argue that they'd be moved one way or the other. Really, it comes down to what is the impact, and at a little over 1% of the total 100-foot zone around the margin of this pool, it is pretty insignificant, it looks like to me. And I think with appropriate plantings that it's probably going to be fine. If I were to propose a condition, it would be that the Myers allow someone to determine whether that's a vernal pool or not without prejudice, I guess is the way to put it, so that it would have no impact on their project, regardless of the findings. I think that there's merit for the town in establishing wherever vernal pools are, and this is an opportunity to get this one certified if it is indeed a vernal pool. And I don't think they should pay a penalty for that, as sort of was maybe intimated in our last conversation. I wouldn't approve of that at all. So sort of without prejudice, just permission to investigate this without having any impact on, I mean, they're going to, assuming we vote to give a variance, I don't see that we could very well reel that variance back in any case. So that's sort of where I'm at with it.
I agree with that, Tom.
Charlotte, can you bring up the site plan?
Yes, I can do that. Or Caroline, would you like me to share my screen?
Either way.
Okay,
Okay.
I can pull it up.
Yeah, maybe easier.
I just want to make sure no one else has any questions, and assuming so, we'll make sure the motion's appropriate.
May I ask a clarifying question? Regarding certifying the pool, would that be at the Myers expense or something? Are you looking for permission to access, for the town to access? I'm just curious.
I think that's the actual gathering the data is pretty simple, actually.
Okay.
And can be accomplished. Probably it might take 1 or 2 visits to see if there's fairy shrimp swimming around in there, and leave a recorder in the field overnight for several nights. So it would be a very almost very unobtrusive trespass, if you will.
Oh, I was just wondering financially, just so they're aware.
I think that I think there might be enough interest to get a volunteer to do that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for them as they
Right.
think about this. Sure. Thank you.
And according to the state's regulations, citizen scientists can do this. You don't need to have a professional biologist to do it. Basically, what they're looking for is a recording during the frog breeding season to see if they can not just recognize wood frogs, but a sufficient number of them to warrant designating it as a viable vernal pool, and also evidence of fairy shrimp that proves that there are no fish there that can eat the eggs or the larvae. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing, and then you just turn that into DMF, and sometime in the next 12 months, they haven't even done last year's yet. Sometime in the next 12 or 24 months, they would probably rule one way or the other. But again, I really emphasize that just permission would, and regardless of how it was found, whether it was a vernal pool or not, would not impact their plans in any way.
Thank you. Thanks.
And
Tom's just hoping you have cold beer for like 100 or 150 people, that's all.
What's that?
I said, Tom's just hoping you have cold beer for 100 or 150 of his closest friends.
I think Mr. Zimmer could make that determination as well. Next month, probably, in the next few weeks, if not month.
Yeah, it's really, if you have a recorder with a small microphone and a windsock on it, that's really, that's the hardest part, and you just leave it overnight. The voice activated dictaphone will work just fine. So it doesn't matter to me whether a professional does it or whether a volunteer does it, just as long as it gets done. And again,
Boy Scout.
This is a Boy Scout.
Boy Scout.
Yeah,
That's
no,
actually
really,
a great idea.
Very seriously. In fact,
That is.
that's a great idea. Maybe we can maybe we can recruit our Boy Scout to expand his Eagle project because it's not very far away, to measure both of them at the same time.
Yeah, and you'll have a pretty good understanding of when that first warm, rainy night is during the spring. And if you go out a day or two after that, the frogs and salamanders will have bred, or the majority of them. So you'll be able to find egg masses if they're there. And it's in a matter of about 15 minutes, you can figure out whether or not it's an active pool.
Right. And again, I think that's a benefit to the town to know where our resources are, and to avoid any further problems that are caused by the uncertainty of this. So that's how I would like to proceed.
Sounds great.
Mr. Chair, I think that at the last meeting, the commission was looking for further justification, documentation from the applicant with respect to the vernal pool. I think Mr. Zimmer has accomplished that with this 4-page document. I'm convinced that he's hit on all the points that we asked him to. So thank you for that, John. And I'm satisfied with this project moving forward, as what we have in front of us here is a project that is a BVW. There is minimal work in the 50, other than it looks like a couple of the leaning or damaged trees to be removed. And outside of that, there is no work being proposed in the 50-foot buffer zone. And I'm ready to make a motion to move this project forward, if nobody has any further comment.
I'd just like to add that condition, Jay, if you can add it. You're so good at phrasing these.
Well, is there any further comment on the?
No.
No.
Myers?
All right. Okay.
No, we don't have any additional comments. This is all very reasonable to us. Thank you.
I'll save the special order for the moment. Let's just go with the variance, because there is a couple of trees being removed in the 50. So Jay Pimpari will make a motion to issue a variance for work within the 50 for the project at 136 Atlantic Ave.
I have a second.
Second.
Having a motion and a second to issue a variance for the removal of two trees within the 50-foot buffer. I'll take a roll call vote. William Ashton,
William Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Trish Grady,
Trish Grady abstain.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pampari, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 601.
Jay Pampari, I'd like to make a motion to issue an order of conditions for the project at 136 Atlantic Avenue. And Tom, if you want to make a second and add your special condition to that, I'll let you have the floor.
I'll second that and add the condition that the property be accessible to our agent and perhaps one other person to conduct a brief investigation over the course of the next 5 weeks. John, does that sound about right for the breeding season to you?
Yeah, it should. I would probably say over the next 2 months, just in case
Yeah,
we need to
okay.
extend it a little bit to catch any of the late
Okay.
And
breeders.
so I just want to add to that, Tom, to add to that motion that we're doing this investigation for the existence of a vernal pool, and the final determination of a vernal pool will have no impact and/or bearing on
Right.
the prior approval of this project.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Having heard a motion and a second, we'll take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Aye. Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Aye.
Trish Grady,
Grady abstain.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pampari, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 601. Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
We also need a
Thank you. I
stormwater
appreciate
permit.
your help with
Oh, whoa,
this.
sorry.
Yeah,
We need a
sorry.
stormwater permit. Sorry. Oh,
We need, Jay Pampari make a motion to issue a stormwater permit for the project at 136 Atlantic Avenue.
Second.
Second.
having a motion, a second to issue a stormwater permit for 136 Atlantic Avenue. Roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, aye.
Trish Grady,
Trish Grady abstain.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pampari, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 601. Now, thank you very much.
Thank you. May I
Thanks.
make one
Thanks.
comment unrelated? The Boy Scout idea. I have a son in Situate who's a scout, and scouts are always looking for Eagle Scout projects, and they tend to do what the boys in front of them have done because they're not as creative. But there's a lot of trails cut in Situate, and my son's in Situate. But if there was ever some general ideas that you gave to a Cub Master or a Scout Master, I think like recording critters and stuff would be a great project. There were several sites, or, I mean, if you had a job that they could handle, because I know our boys aren't that creative, but if they had an idea, that maybe run with it. It was a nice thought.
I think John's got some critters he needs to have recorded. John, you got some critters?
I could put them to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe start with Cohasset. They have a great troop, I know.
Or Ms. Rees, you could contact Charlotte about this and
Give her a come. I don't know if you want Situate or Cohasset first, or if it matters, but yeah.
oh, we're not that parochial. Some of us are not.
It can be first come, first serve.
Yes.
Caroline, I know that Holly Hill Farm is always looking for people to cut trails. Matter of
That's
fact,
what they do in
They need
Situate.
them. They need them right now, and coming out with saws and loppers is any Saturday be very valuable.
Yeah, I think the Situate boys tend to do that, but I like the critters too. Okay, thank you.
Good,
pass
thank
it
you
on.
very much.
Thank you for your help with this. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we had one other hearing on the agenda tonight for 12 Hobart Lane, which has, the applicant has requested to be continued till April 7th. 2022. So that's, I guess, 4 weeks from tonight. So, thank you. Then the next item on our agenda, that's it for hearings tonight. The next item for on our agenda is for approval of the minutes from February 24th, 2022. I don't know if everyone's got a chance to look at them and if anyone had any comments.
Chris, excuse me, I have to get a charging cable. I'm running out of juice. I'll be back in a second.
Okay. So we'll take that as he didn't have any comments. Did anyone else
No,
have any
didn't-
comments?
Nope.
No? Okay, so without any comments to that, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, we'll do a quick roll call vote for approval. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower. Oh, it's
He's
not
getting
here.
juiced.
Jay Papare,
Dave Campari, aye.
Chris McFarland. Aye. Trish, I passed over you. I don't think you were there that night, were you?
I wasn't, and that's why I abstained from the other one.
Yes, okay. So without Eric, that vote passes 5-0-2 to approve the minutes. We'll move on to the commission business. Looking for reports from the chair and the conservation agent. I have no reports for tonight. Charlotte, do you have anything to share?
Yes, I can run through these briefly because I have some certificates of compliance requests. There are a lot of, dock construction, updates, and I'm going to just group them all together, saying a lot of those are happening at Beach Street. We just got the Chapter 91 license for 33 Stanton Road, 72 North Main, and 51 Gammons Road. A lot of those docks, have started construction. So I'll be, visiting those sites and, reporting any updates I see. And then this past week and this week, there's been the MAC annual conference. I've definitely attended a lot of workshops and there's a lot of good stuff going on. Something that we will hear in the near future is there will be some updates to the stormwater management standards, preferably to standards 2, 3, and 4, as well as some updates on 7, which is the redevelopment one. And then they're actually adding a new standard 11. So there's going to be more updates coming for that. I believe they are in the midst of editing the stormwater management manual that will be open for public comment soon. They're trying to aim for April. So you'll definitely be hearing from me about this. I'll pass along any knowledge that I see. And then last but not least, just so you guys have an
I'm
update.
sorry, Charlotte, before
sorry.
we move on, who's allowed to make comments?
It'll be a public comment period. So it will be open, I think, for quite a while. And then eventually they want to finalize it more towards like the fall. So actually, I think I do have, I put it in OneDrive. I have a brief timeline that's pretty general right now.
Yeah, you don't have to bring that up.
Okay.
But when you
so yeah.
when you're aware of a comment period, please distribute it. I think all the
Will do.
commissioners would like to see it.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of good changes. I watched a presentation on it today, and one thing that we have been looking at with previous stormwater permits is looking at the NOAA plus, data, and it looks like they will be switching to that standard with one of their proposed changes for standard 2. So lots of interesting stuff coming up the pipeline. And then for construction updates, Dolan Lane has started construction, at least on the well. There was an approved well that was added to the plan, I think, a year ago. Board of Health also approved it. So that's outside of the 25-foot isolated vegetated wetland buffer, but just want to let you guys know that there is some activity over there now. There was a fallen tree in the buffer zone, but I have not heard updates from the applicant yet. I did reach out to them to, let us know and come back to conservation. And then there is an administrative stormwater permit that I received for 66 Jerusalem Road from Hardy and Mann Design. I received this a couple weeks ago and it's due next Thursday. So if you guys do have any comments, feel free to reach out to me over email separately, any questions, things like that. I've already sent a bunch of questions to the engineer. One pending document that I will say that I'm waiting on is a landscaping plan. And then some of the other major changes that I discussed were probably rewriting utilities because some of them were near some pretty nice trees. So I want to make sure that those trees aren't affected. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about that stormwater permit, just let me know. I know a couple of you have looked at it already. Want me to move on to certificates of compliance?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we have three. I'll start with the most interesting one that I've received so far since I started here. I received a request from Ted Lubitz, who is the property owner for 87-124 Elm Street. There is an old 1973 order of conditions that has been registered with, recorded with the Registry of Deeds. And it's a pretty simple order of conditions. And since it's from 1973, this is like right around the time the Wetlands Protection Act was implemented. And so I can share my screen to show you guys what that looks like. But basically it's the construction of a seawall that is composed of riprap and Jersey barriers. And so I went out to the site with Ted to look at it. And from what I can see, the seawall was built in compliance, at least with the site plan, which I'll show. It's at the bottom of this document. So I just wanted to go through the conditions briefly, that this condition looks like it's been followed and that the wall was built to the plan. And I can't evaluate, obviously, some of these conditions that are listed here about, the timing of the construction. And of course, these are just administrative and regulatory, but that it's not granting any property rights, which is understood by the current owner. And then these are the ones I can't really evaluate, that the work was completed within 1 year from the order conditions. So I wasn't alive in 1974. And then prior to the commencement of the work, under 60 days must have elapsed from the filing of the notice of intent. So we can't confirm these two. But then the 9th condition I can confirm, since it was recorded and it needs to be closed out. And so this was the, oops, sorry.
Can you explain to us, since that property has changed hands within a very recent period of time, how was it that this wasn't closed out before then?
I have absolutely no idea. This was just, I think it just came up in a review of, the documents that were on the registry. That is what a lot of legal representatives do, for banks, when you're trying to sell the property. Usually they do a land court and a registry review to see if there's any open permits. And this one was just sitting here. So I'm not sure why it wasn't closed out, but if anyone's seen the seawall along Elm Street, you can see that it is pretty much built like this diagram with the Jersey barriers and the riprap. And it doesn't look like they used any, dirty looking fill with debris or, rubbish or anything like that. So that was part of condition 1 in this order of conditions.
Charlotte, I'm gonna suggest that you meet with Amy on this, because
I did, yeah.
But the applicant is not the person asking for the certificate of completion.
Yeah, I think this was
How do we do that?
So at least when I talked to Amy about this, really her only comment was that it has to be closed out in a public meeting, so we have to vote on it. She didn't really mention if the current applicant is requesting it. So I'm happy to double check with her on that, but at least for evaluating the order of conditions, when I talked to Mass DEP as well, they said, you pretty much just go out with what you have. So I went out with this order of conditions, and I also found the minutes from 1973. And it's a different person listed. It looks like I'm not sure who the person is, but it's definitely not the current property owner for this site. But if we need to document that in any way with closing it out, I'm happy to clarify that with legal counsel.
Okay, so all right. So we'll take a vote tonight, and then, but I mean, we're just voting to close out this, or to issue a certificate of completion. But legal counsel needs to actually approve that this can be, done without the original applicant involved. So
I agree. Yeah.
Is this time sensitive?
I believe so. Yes. I do not see Ted Lubitz on the call, but at least when I talked to him, this was related to a time sensitive issue.
All right. Thank you.
But yeah, I'm definitely happy to clarify that with legal of how we can document that and how you would write a certificate of compliance for someone who isn't either here or moved out of town or whatever it is. But usually, at least when we've issued certificates of compliance for other projects, it is understanding that the property owners may change from time to time, but we're closing it out for the property site specifically. So also just to clarify, this order of conditions was listed as 87 Elm Street, which as we know, it's now 124. So I would definitely want to clarify that on the certificate of compliance. But usually when you are closing out projects, no matter how old they are, at least from what I understood, it's understandable that you would switch owners from time to time, but you are still attached to the actual property address.
Charlotte, is there a fee for this certificate of compliance? I know in the new applications, I think it's, I don't know, we redid the bylaws in, I don't know, 2015 timeframe.
Yeah.
The fee was paid upfront for a certificate of compliances, but pre-2015 timeframe,
yep,
there was a fee that the applicant need to come in and pay to get the certificate of compliance.
That's a good point. I would definitely assume that has not been paid, so I'm happy to reach out about that. But yes, you are correct. Of like, I believe 2016 or 17 is when we switched over for applications. We've included that COC cost up front.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm definitely happy to clarify that. Did not think of that. Thank you.
Do we just take a vote, or do I need a motion on this?
At least
give me a
legal
motion.
counsel clarified vote. Yeah, but maybe just a motion too.
Jay Pampari make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for the project for the NOI, 1973 NOI for 87 Elm Street.
Yes, sir. Okay. With the condition that it's approved by council, right?
With a condition that is approved by council, and I would inform Charlotte to only apply the Conservation Commission signatures after you've collected the fees for the certificate of compliance.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Trish Grady, second.
Having a motion and a second to issue a certificate of compliance for 87 Elm Street. Take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisenhower, aye.
Trish Grady,
Trish Grady, aye.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pampari, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 7-0-0.
All right, thank you. And then moving on to the next one, which is 41 Pleasant Street. This one is both a notice of intent and a stormwater permit from 2018. This was, I believe, sorry, I'm pulling up my summary now. So this plan I did look at in detail with the property owner and actually with the engineer, because I did have some questions for the deviations that I found. They do appear to be relatively minor. But these were my clarifications, and some of the changes that were noted in between the approved plan and the as-built. We had approved 3 drywall systems of 2 infiltration 36 high capacity chambers, but on the as-built, it's actually 2 drywall systems composed of 3 chambers. So the number of chambers is still the same, but obviously how many of them and where they were are different from the approved plan. So I did talk to the engineer, Jeff Hassett, about this. I believe he's actually in the audience if anyone has any questions. But for the most part, since it's still 6 chambers and they're relatively in pretty much the same locations, the only one that was not done was the one on the left side of the house, which would have crossed the 50-foot buffer. And so the one in front of the gravel patio in the back of the house and on the right side of the house have still been installed. And pretty much he confirmed that it results in the same volume and storage and does not impact the stormwater calculations on the site. And then, I did note that one of the chambers was moved towards the gravel patio. It was moved slightly into the 50-foot buffer. But again, the engineer clarified, we had previously approved this plan with 3 chambers where, three dry wells where one was in the 50-foot buffer. And then, I asked about the one on the left side of the house, but like they said, they wanted to also preserve the landscaping. So that's why they also just built 2 3-chamber systems. And then pretty much, again, the locations don't really affect it. I did have another note about the size of the gravel patio in the back of the house. but the patio is pervious as it was originally proposed and approved, but it's actually 37% smaller than permitted, and again, doesn't impact stormwater. And then I did ask for photos of the dry well, but those were not available, but the as-built ties were provided. And then I just had a few other minor clarification questions that were answered. We did find when we went to the site that they did install 3 trees as we had originally approved. 2 were in the same location as the approved, and then 1 was built on the right side. I'm sorry, 1 was installed on the right side of the house. So they did install 3 trees. And just to note, all those trees are outside of the 100-foot buffer. And then I just had some slight clarifications on the proposed grading, which were clarified here. And so for the most part, the only special condition was that we don't use chromated copper arsenate treated wood. And the property owner did confirm that lumber was not used in the construction of the property. And so I did take a bunch of photos. I'm not sure if you guys want me to go through them, but those were what I noted and what were clarified. And so I don't know if anyone has any other questions, but for the most part, it seems like this was completed in compliance with the order of conditions.
I have one question for Jeff, if you could let him in here.
Sure, I can do that. I'll just promote Andrew or Andy Gelson as well, who's the property owner. Hi, Jeff, can you hear us?
I can. Good evening.
The fact that the chambers moved further
Chris,
into
we
the.
can't hear you.
Oh, shit. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can.
Okay. The fact that the chambers moved into the 50-foot buffer, those properties are pretty low. I mean, is there any room between those chambers and groundwater? Or are they sitting in the groundwater?
This was a raise and rebuild project where they were actually decreasing the amount of impervious. So naturally, there was a reduction in runoff. And working with the site constraints, it's a low-lying property. So the only way to get those higher would be to bring in fill to the property, which isn't what we were proposing. So there's certainly it's certainly an improvement compared to the what was there before. What was there?
But they do sit in the groundwater table, do they not?
I'm not sure, to be honest, if they're completely or they're probably just above the water table. They probably don't have the full 2 feet of separation anyways.
Okay. Any other questions or motion?
Sure, this is just more of a question, but when the actual construction deviates from the approved plan, what's typically the notification process?
Sure. So, I'm sorry, are you talking like before we notice a deviation or like
right
after
like,
the
so
fact?
if the engineers, when they're actually doing, or when the construction's happening and it's deviating from the plans, what
Yeah,
should
so
a homeowner do?
typically how we want it to happen is if we do need to switch up the plan, that I'm notified in writing. So that's specified in our stormwater permit. And it's also, I believe, in our boilerplate for special conditions. So normally they would notify the agent, and the agent would go out, look at it, and we would make any necessary clarifications. And then depending on the level of changes, if it's a minor change that has no additional adverse impact on the resource area, the buffer zones, it can be approved administratively. And then if it has any moderate implications where it could have a potential impact, we normally would request an amended filing for a notice of intent, and then for an amended order of conditions. And then, of course, significant changes, you'd have to consider amended or possibly even a new NOI. But for the most part, for minor changes, usually those are discussed with the agent, and with any commissioner as needed. But for the most part, yeah, it's pretty much through the agent.
I appreciate it. I'm just more clarifying for the public.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful.
If they don't notify us of changes, then what's required is an as-built plan at the end that the commission can then look at and rule on. So it's in their best interest to notify the agent while it's going on instead of waiting to the end and hope hope that it gets approved.
Yeah, to clarify on that, this house was built a couple years ago. More recently, especially in the last several months, we've been filing a lot of minor modifications. Because I agree, at the end, it makes the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah. Do I have a motion?
Jay Pampari, make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for the project at 41 Pleasant Street.
Do I have a second?
Aye.
Having a motion and a second to issue a certificate of compliance for 41 Pleasant Street. Take a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, aye.
Tom Bell,
Tom Bell, aye.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Eric Eisenhower,
Eric Eisner, yes.
Trish Grady,
Trish Grady, aye.
Jay Pampari,
Jay Pampari, aye.
Chris McFarland, aye. That vote passes 7-0-0.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right.
Charlotte, how about 191 Atlantic Avenue?
All right, last but not least, I'm gonna be brief with this one as best as I can. When I went to the site this week, and honestly, any commissioners who drive by Atlantic Ave can see that right now the front yard is all dirt, so it has not been loam and seeded. So I did talk to the engineer about that this week, and I will still, I still said I'll bring your COC request to the commission, but I did come up with a list of what I think are pending items that should be looked into before we can address a COC, but I will definitely defer to you guys since we need to vote on it. So I'll share my screen real quick. This is the list that I came up with. And of course, I'm open to any comments from commissioners. So the biggest change, which again is visible from the street, other than the yard that still needs to be loam and seeded, is there is a retaining wall that has now been added to the front of the property along Atlantic Ave. And so apparently this was discussed with the previous agent, according to the engineer, but I don't have written correspondence about that. And the agent at the time was concerned with the drainage of going into Atlantic Ave. And so what happened was not only did they do the retaining wall, but they also built a PVC drainage pipe along the front of the wall underground along Atlantic Ave to help with drainage. Of course, that is not currently labeled on the as-built and was not part of the approved plan, and neither was the retaining wall. So both the building inspector and I have asked for clarifications about the retaining wall, given the dimensions, details, any applicable notes, as well as the PVC drainage pipe along Atlantic Ave. So we want to look into that in further detail. And then also walking the site with the engineer, he clarified that there were perforated pipes that were installed in the front and the backyard to assist with drainage from the house, the pool, the garage, etc. And that those were all connected with roof leaders, gutters, and downspouts, which I did confirm on the site. So I did see all of the roof leaders, gutters, and downspouts. But of course, what's not labeled on the as-built are those, plus the pipes, draining into the front and the backyard. All of that needs to be on the as-built. Of course, the loam and seed in the front and the backyard. And then the pool and the hot tub in the back of the house have not yet been covered with a plaster installation. So that does need to be completed. And then there are a few things here and there that I noted around the site, like concrete utility pads, brick paths, planting areas. All of that stuff was not really specifically clear on the original plan. There was an amended site plan for an order of conditions back in 2020. This is just a notice of intent, by the way. And I will say that I am confused why there's no stormwater permit with this project, because it's a very big lot. It's over 2 acres, but there's only a notice of intent. I checked all the way back to when we first started issuing stormwater permits. But I will clarify that on the as-built, there is a well, which was approved by conservation in 2021. So this is the list of the pending items that I would personally like to see addressed before we want to entertain a COC. But if anybody had time to look at, I'm sorry I did this last minute, but the pictures or the documents or anything that was received by the engineer, I'm more than open for comments. And if we want to entertain a COC with this stuff, I'll defer to you guys.
So you said the retaining wall along Atlantic Avenue, but it's also runs the whole length of the property on the side, does it not?
Yes, I believe it goes all the way up to the other person's property, which would be 187, I believe, right next door. And then it goes to the existing entrance with the, stone like lamp fixtures. And then, so it does extend across the entire front of the property.
So do we have the as-built?
We do, yes. And the retaining wall
But you're saying there's things that aren't on here.
Correct. Yeah. This is what I would recommend adding to the as-built because that's what I saw on the site. And it's not really clear on the as-built.
Well, so do the modifications cause there to be limits that would trigger other work? I mean, other permitting?
I'm happy to look into that with the building inspector, but I will say one of the major
I mean, our permits. I'm not talking about.
our permits?
Yes.
So at least a lot of these changes definitely would have affected our amended order of conditions because the entire property is for the most part in our jurisdiction. So, you know, again, the retaining wall, all these little minor changes here and there, and all of that would have, you know, definitely impacted our notice of intent submission. There was an amended notice filed back in 2020, but it wasn't specifically discussing these changes.
I'm going to recommend that we have a show cause hearing for, you know, once that's as-built complete.
Okay, yeah, the engineer anticipates the work being done in May, so maybe we could, do we want to suggest May for an update on all the stuff made to the as-built? Yes, no.
I think that works, yeah, sure.
Okay, and just to keep commissioners in mind for our standard conditions, since the entire property is pretty much in our jurisdiction, it's split in between two different 50-foot buffers, and then, you know, the yard is obviously in the 100. I wanted to just kind of note this, you know, of our standard current practice with herbicides, pesticides. So I guess we can entertain future conversations, but yeah, I apologize. This is very lengthy, but I just wanted to give it a really thorough overview since it's a huge site. But yeah, I guess we can follow up in May and we can see, you know, what all the updates are, why those changes were made, and go from there.
You know, so let's take a look at this. I don't think we necessarily should wait till May because.
No? Okay.
No, because then the project's going to be done, and then they're going to complain that
True.
we could have looked at things ahead of time.
Okay.
I think we need an as-built as quickly as possible so that we can.
Okay.
I mean, if there wasn't a stormwater permit, there needs to be one. We need to review it. So
Yeah,
because obviously what they presented would have, if it would have triggered a stormwater permit, then we would have done one. So obviously you're thinking that what they've actually built triggers one. So we should.
Yeah, I definitely want to look. I want to rewatch the recording from when we approved their notice of intent submission originally, because according to the engineer, they weren't increasing impervious by 500 square feet because they were
Right.
using the existing house footprint. But obviously, I'm more thinking about the 5,000 square foot rule because the entire property is 2 acres. So, you know, regrading the front, the back, you know, all that stuff, rerouting utilities, redoing the house. Like I'm not a stormwater engineer, but I would assume that adds up to more than well over 5,000 square feet. So I'm not sure why a stormwater permit wasn't issued. I need to look into that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Okay. So do you want me to, do we want to vote on a COC and then follow up?
No.
No COC. Okay.
No reason to vote.
Okay. Okay.
You think
I'll try to get it as.
Do you think they built their retaining wall on their own property, or do we have another situation like that? Like
The reason why we are asking is because we don't think it was built on the property line. But we need to obviously look into that. But it seems like there is an assumption it might have been built past the property line. Yep.
Well, the side one is equally as concerning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right, I'll follow up with the engineer and we'll try to get an as-built ASAP. But then do we want to request for them to get a show cause hearing once they give that to us?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Any topics not reasonably anticipated in 48 hours?
Oh, I'm violating it again, but I did go to the Harbor Committee meeting and not much happening there that affects us. There may be something in the near future. Town's talking about the potential to buy 22 Margin. which is that empty lot right across from the northwest corner of the old Cohasset Harbor Inn. It's there's no structures on it, and it's in the I believe the AE FEMA zone. Their 50-foot buffer crosses into it, maybe 6 or 8 feet, and then obviously the 100-foot buffer kind of cuts through the middle of it. And so I guess there's an outstanding question about whether that lot, anything could ever be built on that lot, short of just maybe a crushed stone parking lot and maybe some uncovered boat sheds.
So the town is looking to purchase that, Tom?
Yeah, they are. They want to. They've already got a drawing of kind of like a miniature park there. It would be the west end of the Captain's Walk, and again, they would be looking to be able to park cars there and have some picnic tables. They're talking about planting some vegetation, but it's right in the smack in the flood zone. And there are no previous structure. There was a previous structure there, but it's been many decades since that structure was standing. So it's overgrown, it's grown over there's no evidence of that structure.
That's number 22, Tom?
22, Margin.
22.
Yeah, it's right at the corner of Stockbridge and Margin. It's that empty lot there in the corner of Stockbridge and Margin. And of course, it's a problematic property in that it's only, the elevation is only about 7.5 feet, so it floods. It's one of the first places to flood when we get a storm tide.
But it's across the street. There's a roadway there, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's across the street from essentially from that small commercial dock that exists there.
Yeah.
It's
got lobster pots in it.
Actually, there are 2 abutters there that are both lobstermen, and they're slightly up. One of them's just a little ways up Stockbridge, and the other one abuts him to the north. And they're already starting to squawk a little bit about, I guess, don't want to have a parking lot in their backyard or whatever. So there's going to be some public comment for sure about this thing. And it's not even clear that anything can be done there. I don't know whether how the rules work in terms of putting in a parking lot in a flood zone that doesn't have any pre-existing structure.
Yeah.
Probably something for Amy.
I'm looking at Google Maps, and there's probably about 20 cars parked in that lot right now.
Oh yeah, my understanding was that it belonged to a family that used to live in town, and they used to have a party there every year. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the place. That's it right there. And that first row of cars would be in the 50. And right where they're, where they join the second row of cars would be about the approximate boundary. But that's where the 50 line would go.
Okay.
So we may be looking at that in the future if the town does decide to go ahead and buy it. It's my understanding that Cohasset Hospitality Partners wants a lot of money for it. But if it's not a buildable lot, I don't see why the town would have to pay a lot of money for it. So that's something, due diligence that town has to do, I guess. So that I don't know whether they come to us or whether they go to the attorney or what to determine whether or not it's a buildable lot, let's say.
Well, they can go to Charlotte and get some feedback from the agent on a consultation, but until there's a formal package that's in front of us, we can't make any rulings on that. But if somebody wants to contact Charlotte and get a feel from the agent on what the issues are and buffer, et cetera, then by all means, I would instruct them to go see Charlotte.
Another conversation was about, I think his first name is John Sullivan, who now owns the complex around the lobster pound and the former boatyard there, and owns Atlantica. And it sounds like they have very ambitious plans for that. We're certainly going to be hearing from him in the very near future. I have no idea where they're going to park the cars to do anything there. But he's talking about 24 room boutique hotel.
Yeah, right.
Lovely.
Where the
If you-
lobster, where the lobster
Yeah.
count was, and
Right.
then even more commercial around the new restaurant that they want to build. So we're going to have some real hot harbor stuff to deal with here within the
Yeah.
next year.
If you go
They have to come on their
to, if you
bicycle.
go to cohassetwharf.com, you'll find all the information of all the drawings, etc. And
Right.
with that, I know that there's a lot going on. I heard that the Cohasset Wharf project where Atlantic currently is now, I heard a rumor it was in front of zoning, but Charlotte, do you know where that stands, or if we are expecting an application coming from them anytime soon?
No, but I definitely wanted to check in with the planning and zoning director. She's on vacation this week, but I do know it has reached zoning. I'm not sure if planning has looked at it yet, but I definitely want to know the timeline because it's definitely coming to us one way or another. But I can follow up on that.
All right, I'm just curious. Okay.
The last
Make it
comment.
after June 30th.
My last comment was I took the wetland soils course. It was excellent. And Charlotte was there too.
So-
Associated planning or whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately, I got pulled away into multiple meetings with people, so I'm watching the recording. But I did watch the riverfront development training today, and that was extremely helpful. But I definitely want to watch the wetland soils recordings because those seemed like awesome courses. I just sadly couldn't. I got pulled away.
It made me. That's what prompted me to ask for photographs of the test pits. I think we should have photographic evidence of all of the test pits that go in.
Yeah, while we're at it, I took the, I guess it was Fundamentals Unit 208, the applying the science to the regulations for projects in the buffer zone, which came in quite handy tonight on a couple of projects. And these MAC courses now, they probably will be going back to in person, but they're fantastic. It was actually 2.5 hours on, I guess it was last night. It seemed like a long time ago, but they're great. And you can go back and listen to the recording. You can, make dinner while it's ongoing. It's not like you're driving 3 hours to sit in a classroom. They're really informative. They're live presentations. The Q&A is, I find, more
So
useful than
helpful.
actual presentations. And if they ever have case studies, those are actually fantastic. So case studies are the best, and just encourage all of commissioners to try and join in some of those MAC courses. They're free. The town of Cohasset has been paying for them, so it's no money out of your pocket. You just send Angela an email, or I actually send an email directly to Lindsay Matucci at MAC, and she just signs me right up. So encourage anybody to take these courses.
There were 130 participants at the soils one.
Oh, good.
So questions. So it's tough for questions. There was a lot of congratulations, but not quite so many questions.
There was also a tree and shrub identification, like virtual field ID course that I took yesterday, and that was also extremely helpful. They sent me literally a box of twigs and stuff, and we got to all look at them and identify them. So, and there's also a lot of field courses. I will say they're out of Belmont if people are up for the drive, but I've taken the winter tree ID course, which was incredibly helpful. There's also one that's offered, when there are, leaves on the trees. So if you guys are interested in any of those field courses, they definitely, happen a couple times a year. And then of course the unit courses, for anybody interested in the fundamentals, those are definitely offered, at least once or twice a year, a couple times a year. So keep an eye out for those. And yeah, if you guys are ever interested, definitely shoot Angela an email about signing up. And yeah, they're worth the time.
If you want to identify trees in the winter, you should buy that book, Bark.
Oh yeah, it's on my list.
Yeah, it's an
That's
amazing.
the hard work.
What's that?
It's a hard science. It's a hard science identifying trees by bark.
It's tough.
It's tough, yeah.
They all
Do you
look
think that
different.
they're going to do them like a hybrid in person as well as Zoom in the future? Because I think they've gotten some great attendance by
That's a
doing
great
the Zoom
question.
offerings. Because I never would have been able to get my fundamentals if they didn't have Zoom. At first, I was dreading it, but that was actually so much more practical for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm happy to look into that because I do think they like the Zoom courses because it does help with participation. But I do know a lot of those field courses are usually in person. But like I said, the one I just did where you just get everything in a box and you ID it, virtually is also helpful. So
Very
looking at it in the
creative.
field helps. But yeah. So yeah, I can look into that. But I think I would assume they want to keep virtual at least for a little while because their conference is virtual this year, but they did consider doing the one next year, possibly in person. But maybe it's hybrid. Who knows?
I mean, the virtual must be a boom for their attendance, I would think.
Yeah.
Many more
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
And
it's
they're good
tough.
courses, yeah.
Tough for a lot of people. I mean, this is a little state, but it's a long drive to get
It is.
to
It
go
is.
to attend these things. So yeah.
If $6 a gallon it is.
Don't you have an electric car yet?
No, I got a V8.
I know, me too. But I have an electric one too.
Charlotte.
Are these meetings gonna stay virtual? Is that the plan, or is there any?
So for the time being, yes, I did receive some feedback from the Board of Health director that it sounds like the state has extended it to about July to keep meetings, virtual for a little while longer. But if that timeline changes, I'll definitely let you know. I do know when we had our legal training with Amy Questle, she briefly mentioned April, and I was like, oh. And so it sounds like it's been extended to July.
July would be perfect.
Yeah.
Oh no, January would be better.
I think we have no say in this.
No.
No.
Charlotte, were you able to ask Amy about the applicant at on Lambert Lane? In his presentation?
So I've definitely been sending her questions like about Riverfront in general, but at least as an update for that one, I haven't yet gotten the PowerPoint from the owner. And so once I get that, I can reach out to Amy to set up a call to review the documents that we were presented, that were presented to us. But I'm definitely happy to follow up on that because I haven't heard this week.
Would you send the applicant a letter, please?
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
an email and let him know that it's our intention to have legal counsel review what he presented as factual evidence and we need the presentation.
I agree.
We have it on tape though, right?
We do. I was about to mention that of like once the YouTube recording is posted, we can probably set up a meeting very quickly to just look at it and where Amy can watch it on her own time and then we can have a meeting about it.
You should let Amy watch it on her own time. And
absolutely.
then we can have a discussion.
Chris, I'm gonna go have dinner. I wish you a good evening, all right?
Eric, it's only 10:05.
I know, it's dinner time.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Night, everybody.
All in favor?
Thank you, Chris. Great meeting.